Chapter 311. Maine stood on an arched hillside, looking at the city in front of him. The last time he came, Wolfshart City was far from what it looked like now. Its walls were built with snow stones from the kingdom of eternal winter, clean and white, just like the teeth of a newborn wolf. In just 3 months, it had completely changed its appearance. The damaged parts were filled with local black boulders, and the parts that couldn't be repaired in time were built with wooden frames and baffles. The flowing blood soaked into the cracks of the stone, staining it with a touch of reddish-brown. From a distance, the current walls were rough and covered with dirt, like the teeth of a weather-beaten old wolf. Compared to before, it was more like the fangs of a predator. Only after biting its prey would it become more frightening. The church's army set up camp about 5 miles away from Wolfshart City. In order to prevent the Queen of Clearwater from attacking the old holy city, the scale of the army this time was not as large as the last time. The army of judges and the supply team each had 5,000 people, while the God's Punishment army had about 800 people. But with top-secret siege weapons and the pure witches, Maine had full confidence in capturing the Wolf King's lair. Your Eminence, the siege beasts have been placed in place, ready to attack at any time. A priest ran to the top of the hill and reported to him. What about the pure witches who control them? They're also ready. Maine raised the telescope and observed the position of the siege beasts, only to see 2 huge steel beasts lying in the field 2 miles away from King's City, surrounded by baffles on both sides and a straw shed on top. If one didn't look closely, it would be difficult to notice the strange shape of this weapon. Moving his line of sight forward, he saw the God's Punishment army. They were all transformed from the most devout believers of the church, standing straight and motionless in the autumn wind. Only enemies who had fought with them would know the terrifying power possessed by these extraordinary warriors. Unfortunately, they couldn't act on their own and had to fight under the orders of their commanders. These commanders never appeared in public in front of the church, and when they fought, they disguised themselves as members of the God's Punishment army, mixing with the troops. Except for the 3 archbishops and the Pope, no one knew their true identity. Very good. Maine nodded with satisfaction. Return to your position and wait for the horn to sound. Yes, Your Eminence. Next was the Supreme Pontiff's pure witch. When he thought of those 2 witches, he couldn't help but frown. They were completely different from the other witches who had been raised by the church. Even when they were marching and fighting, they still acted in their own way. If it had been one of Maine's pure witches, they would definitely have been whipped as punishment. However, in terms of position in the church, they were on equal footing with the bishop, so Maine had no way to order them around. His Holiness the Pope had only sent 2 pure witches to assist him in battle, but not to order them to fight under his orders. However, he also understood that it was necessary to borrow their strength if he wanted to completely eradicate the hidden danger. The bishop walked down the hill and came to a tent on the outskirts of the camp. He lifted the curtain, and as expected, the tent was empty. Where are Zero and Isabella? He asked the Judgment Army guarding the door. Your Excellencies are interrogating the prisoner, replied the latter. And they must be on the east side of the camp, where there is a level open space, which you can see on the way. Would you like me to call them over? If you could summon them, I wouldn't have come here myself. Moreover, it was a captive game. Weren't they tired of it yet? Maine said with a sullen face. No need, I'll go and have a look. He soon found the place the guard had mentioned. He saw 2 women standing in the middle of the open space. One of them was leaning forward and whispering something into the ears of the other 3 captives, whose hands were tied behind their backs. Her expression was gentle and focused, and her long white hair and robe danced in the wind, like a flawless elf. The other woman had an impressive figure and golden curly hair, and from time to time, she let out a clear and melodious laugh. Tell the surrounding Judgment Army to leave this place immediately. Maine ordered the presiding judge, who was acting as a guard beside him. The same goes for the people in charge of the captives. Tell them not to interfere in this matter. Yes. The blonde witch had also noticed the commotion here. She greeted her companions, and then quickly walked over. Your Excellency. The person who came bowed slightly and said, Why did you drive away the spectators? The trial is about to begin. Lady Isabella, he nodded in return. The full-scale attack on Wolfshart City is about to begin, and it is meaningless to interrogate the captives at this time. Moreover, these people are only spies we caught along the way, and they know very little information. If possible, I hope that you and Zero can immediately rush to the front. Rest assured, since we are here, we can't let an important enemy go, Isabella said, spreading out her hands. As for the trial, I can't stop her. Why don't you act as a spectator? It won't take long anyway. Same as before? Yes, the rules are basically the same, she smiled. Zero likes this kind of game the most. Then quickly start. Damn it. Main's face was expressionless, but his heart was extremely annoyed. Rather than calling it a trial game, it would be more appropriate to call it a cat and mouse game. The captives had to escape from the other side's designated range or defeat the witches in order to get a chance to live, but this chance was extremely slim. It was just a bait to lure the mice to fight. It seemed easy to achieve, but in fact it was far beyond reach. This was also his intention to drive away the Judgment Army who were responsible for protecting and monitoring the pure witches. This process was completely unfair, and the behavior of the other side was also far from being pure. If they saw too much of it, perhaps their faith in the church would be shaken. When I become the Pope, I must teach them the importance of obeying orders. At this time, Zero had already untied the ropes on the captives, and at the same time spread out her hands, indicating that she did not carry any weapons. And in front of the captives were placed a long sword, a scimitar, and a light crossbow. Come on, fight or escape, follow your heart, she said with a smile, and her tone was still gentle. Only God can make a judgment. One of them gritted his teeth, suddenly picked up the crossbow from the ground, and directly shot at the pure witch. Then, regardless of whether the shot hit or not, his other hand had already grabbed a long sword, and took advantage of the momentum to slash forward. The whole movement was so smooth that it was obviously not a skill that a militia would have. However, the sword did not cut anything, and the pure witch took 2 steps back, easily avoiding this surprise attack. When he raised his head, he could not help but be stunned, only to see that the crossbow bolt was bitten by the other side, as if it was a harmless branch. Zero spat out the crossbow bolt, smiled and said, "Please continue." The captive's eyes widened, and his hands slightly trembled. Maine could see that the courage that he had gathered with great difficulty was almost gone. Even if he continued to fight, it was estimated that he would only be able to make one last blow. Sure enough, after a moment of hesitation, he let out a roar as if to vent his anger, raised his sword and rushed straight at the unarmed woman. But this blow was too stiff. Even with his eyes closed, Maine could guess the result. Judging from the short contact with Zero for the past 2 weeks, the ability of this pure witch was simply bottomless. She was not an extraordinary, but she had a fighting talent that was no less than that of an extraordinary witch. This kind of talent did not lie in strength or resistance to blows, but in the superb skills. Even if she did not use her magic, she was also a terrible enough fighter. Zero slightly leaned her body, easily avoiding the opponent's slash, and then with a pair of seemingly weak hands, she clamped the captive's head, and with the help of his forward momentum, gently pulled. Only a light sound was heard, and the captive suddenly became limp as if all the bones in his body had been pulled out. She turned her head and looked at the remaining 2 people. "Next, it's your turn. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 312. Seeing this scene, the other captive turned around and fled, which made Zero somewhat disappointed. She turned into a ray of light and entered the captive's body. The captive immediately stopped, his eyes turned white, and then his body underwent a strange change. This was not the first time Maine had seen such a scene, but no matter how many times he saw it, he could not help but feel a chill in his heart. A dim light burst out from the captive's body, and his body twisted and deformed, finally turning into the appearance of a pure witch. He knew that this was not a simple replacement or killing, but what exactly happened during the transformation process, perhaps only the Pope and the person involved would understand. Zero took a deep breath and walked back to the last captive. He was the youngest of the 3 captured spies, about 14 or 15 years old. His slightly immature eyes were full of shock and fear, as if he could not believe what had just happened. "Now only you are left. She whispered, "Ire." Hearing these words, the boy who was trembling with fear and wanted to pick up the scimitar was suddenly stunned. Why? God told me everything. You were originally a child of a farmer in the suburbs, but because of the Wolf King's order, the whole village was forced to move into the city to undertake labor such as repairing the city wall, making military supplies, transporting provisions, and so on. They didn't let you off just because you were young, but recruited you into the investigation team. In reality, they left you to your own devices. She reached out and stroked his cheek. The best evidence is that when you first came back with information about the movement of the church's army, the captain of the guards didn't even let you through the city gates. After listening to the report, he let you continue to follow us. Am I right? Ire opened his mouth, but could not say a word. Of course they won't let you in because your family no longer exists. Whether it's your parents or brothers, they're just like you. They're just Wolf King's consumables. If they let you go back, won't everyone in the scouting team know about it? Zero continued. Your father accidentally fell and died when he was filling the gap in the city wall. And your mother went to the supervision team but was whipped and punished. She is now in a critical condition. Without God watching over all this, the evil in the world will always flow wantonly like sewage. Are you sure you want to serve such a ruler? He couldn't help but widen his eyes, and an uncontrollable grief appeared on his face. This impossible, you're lying to me. God never lies. The pure witch shook her head. You know deep down that I'm telling the truth. The root cause of all this is that the nobles have never treated you as their own kind. You are just livestock that they can take whatever they want. What we need to do is to put an end to all this evil and injustice and build a new world under the supervision and protection of God. Al fell to his knees and cried bitterly. What should I do? Follow your heart. Only God can judge. He choked with sobs and said, I was wrong. I'm willing to tell you everything I know. I'm willing to do anything to save my mother. Good boy. Zero patted his head and took out a plant full of slender leaf from her pocket and handed it to him. Eat this and have a good sleep. It can help you stabilize your emotions. She tore off half of the leaf and put it in her mouth to chew. Just like me. When Wolfshart City is breached tomorrow, maybe you'll be able to see your mother again. Maine frowned. That plant was the sleeping fern used to make dreamland water. It had no effect on witches when eaten raw, but for ordinary people, it was an extremely strong poison. Winter flowers had to be used to neutralize the toxicity. Sure enough, not long after the captive ate it, his face turned ashen. He clutched his throat and looked at Zero's smiling face in disbelief. His throat emitted a gasping sound. Soon his nails pierced his skin and blood vessels, and his neck was dyed bright red with blood. After struggling in pain for half a quarter of an hour, his body gradually went limp and he stopped breathing. It's a pity that God didn't forgive your sins. Zero curled up the corner of her mouth and walked in front of the archbishop. She bowed and said, My lord, what do you think of this trial? Is it similar to Lady Heather's style? Why did you trick him into eating the sleeping fern? Maine asked in a deep voice. If it was Heather, we would only add one more devout believer, instead of making him realize his mistakes and then executing him. If the captive's relatives were really like what I said, they could naturally be recruited as believers. Unfortunately, I don't know the real situation of his parents. I just spoke nonsense. She shrugged her shoulders. Once he finds out that these are lies, it will obviously be bad for the church. Believe me, I am wholeheartedly working for the church. If you are wholeheartedly working for the church, you should just stay in the tent and wait for orders. Maine impatiently turned his head. The attack is about to begin. You should immediately prepare, according to the plan, the Wolf King and the Queen of Clearwater. They must die, my lord, the pure witch said with a smile. If it was just me, I might not be able to do it, but since even Isabella has come, they will absolutely not be able to escape from the Wolfshart Kingdom. Woo, woo. The horn of the attack rolled across the sky, and in the midst of the dark clouds and the rustling autumn wind, the second siege began. 2 miles away, the siege beasts used to launch their iron spears blossomed with a magical radiance. When this radiance was as bright as the sun, the iron spears seemed as if they were thrown by the hands of a giant. In an instant, A deafening roar broke out, and with a speed that was hard to see with the naked eye, it flew straight towards the city wall. Even after crossing such a long distance, its power did not diminish in the slightest. The snowstone wall was simply unable to stop it. It easily smashed the stones blocking the way into pieces, and even the militia squatting behind the wall suffered a calamity. After only 3 rounds of shooting, the city gate was completely smashed, and the nearby walls were also in ruins. Although the speed of the devil's siege weapons was comparable to that of a catapult, the range was several times longer. Under such an offensive, the garrison was simply unable to fight back. Because they couldn't see the firing trajectory, they didn't even know where the next attack would fall. The church's army had not yet moved, but the outer defensive line was already in danger. Just at this moment, an earth-shattering noise suddenly came from behind the city wall. A huge fireball soared into the sky, and everyone felt the vibration under their feet. Accompanied by flames and black smoke, this section of the stone wall suddenly collapsed, and a gap finally appeared on the mottled wolf's teeth. The urgent horn sounded again, and the mixed team of the army of judges and the God's punishment army began to charge towards the city wall. From a distance, it looked like a flowing sea of gold and red, and anyone who dared to block their way would be mercilessly swallowed up. Now, the garrison of the Wolfshark Kingdom had to use their own flesh and blood to fight against these warriors who didn't belong to the mortal world. To be continued. Chapter 313. Mortals can't defeat demons, Isabella thought. That's why the church had the God's punishment army. They were the best weapon against the demons because they had infinite strength, no pain, and no fear. Although they didn't have the ability to act independently, it was not necessarily a disadvantage when marching in battle. Such a powerful force was naturally not something that the guards, who were mere mortals, could resist. Especially without the support of the city wall. It was simply impossible to defeat these elites of the church in close combat. The Golden Torrent was the army of judges. The main force broke through the main gate of Wolfshart City and fought with the assembled guards. The red dots were the God's punishment army. They jumped over the collapsed walls as if they were walking on flat ground and began to kill the enemies who tried to stand firm. Do you want to help them? She turned to look at Zero. The latter yawned and said, No, my magic power is limited and must be reserved for the important target. You can use swords, hammers, and crossbows to fight. Isabella curled her lips and said, Anyway, they can't defeat you. Zero shook her head and said, If I go, they can easily win. If I don't go, they can also easily win. I don't want to do this kind of meaningless thing. Well, she changed the topic and said, Why did you do that before? What? To play with that captive. His Excellency the Bishop's face is stiff, Isabella said with some worry. He doesn't seem to like this kind of trial, and the next pope is likely to be him, so you may suffer a little. His Excellency Maine will be angry because he hasn't become pope yet, Zero said indifferently. When he enters the library on the top floor of the pivotal secret temple, he will naturally understand that this is the way to please God. What way? To play with. The pure witch stroked her snow-white hair that was blown messily by the wind. God has never come to the world, nor does he protect the world. He only uses an illusory goal to make us approach it one after another, eager to get its gift. This is very similar to the trial just now, isn't it? At least I gave him a clear goal, but God has nothing. He didn't even guarantee that the goal is real, or in other words, everything is our own speculation. Even so, we still risked our lives. TSK, this is the most thorough toying. What is this guy talking about? Why can't I understand a single word? Isabella frowned. You've been to the library? No, she shrugged. His Majesty O'Brien told me all this. He was not a witch and his lifespan was nearing its end. He had heard that when mortals reached the end of their lifespan, they would revisit their life experiences, and could not help but want to find someone to talk to. He even wanted me to devour him before I died. You can't. Of course I can't. This will make Lord Maine furious, Zero interrupted. Don't worry, I know what I can't do. She smiled mysteriously. There's also another possibility. What if I lose? Wouldn't I be giving my body to him for free? I don't think so. If you lose, nothing will happen. Isabella sighed. This guy was a strange person, probably related to her ability. After devouring so many people, there was almost nothing in the world that she had not experienced. So Zero was rarely enthusiastic about one thing. Everything she did was for fun, and it had to be unusual fun. Isabella turned her eyes back to the battlefield. Suddenly, a group of desperados appeared on top of the city wall. They rushed toward the god's punishment army. Most of them were pierced by the whistling spears when they approached, but there were still a few who managed to get close to the god's punishment army. Then there was an explosion, and the smoke and dust raised covered the gap in the city wall. This should be the alchemy weapon that appeared in the last siege, she thought. It looks powerful, and it is a good choice to use to contain the demonic beasts. However, fighting against the god's punishment army was tantamount to suicide. If it were not for the pills, they would not even be able to get close to Scourge. On the other side, the flow of the Golden Sea also slowed down. Suddenly, a raging fire broke out under the city gate, isolating the judges who had not yet entered the city. After some people touched the fire, even if they rolled on the ground, they still could not put it out. Well, the density of God's stones of retaliation behind the gate has increased several times. And there are also 2 of higher quality. It seems that some important people have come, Isabella said. Since that's the case, let's go. Zero stretched her body. But these 2 people are not the Wolf King or the Queen of Clearwater. She glanced at the inner city. The strongest reaction is still in the castle. Are you sure you want to go? Isn't the army in trouble? An easy victory and a Pyrrhic victory are not the same thing. I have to help His Holiness O'Brien reduce his losses. Zero tilted her head and said seriously, as I said before, I am wholeheartedly for the church. In the afternoon, the siege of Wolfshart City's outer defense line was finally broken. After Scourge took control of the breach, the judges began to clear the streets of the resistance. The target has begun to move. Isabella looked in the direction of the castle. They seemed to intend to go to the river dock. The 2 important people who came to organize the resistance were the Wolf King's sons, and now both of them had been swallowed by Zero. Through the prince's information, she further confirmed that the moving god stone was the biggest target of this mission. In addition, they had also killed a fallen witch, whose appearance and attire looked like that of a person from a different race. After the witch's death, the number of mercenaries who dared to die together with the god's punishment army suddenly decreased. They probably want to leave by ship, Zero said with a smile. Let's go and complete the mission given by His Holiness. The other side's actions were obviously very cautious, changing several routes along the way. After arriving at the dock, they did not board the ship with the black sail, but instead chose a small single-masted merchant ship. However, no matter how they covered their tracks, their every move was exposed to Isabella's surveillance. The moment the Wolf King and the Queen of Clearwater boarded the deck of the small boat, the 2 of them had already surrounded them from both sides of the dock. Most of the 20 people on the ship were personal guards, and at this time, they did not even need to ask to know that the situation was not right. Everyone pulled out their weapons, jumped off the ship, and rushed straight towards the pure witch. Once again, Zero showed her exquisite fighting skills. After snatching the sword of a personal guard with her bare hands, she fought with the crowd. Every time she swung her sword, someone would fall, and her footsteps were light and agile. Almost no one could see through her next attack. Whether it was picking, chopping, or blocking, Zero used the most appropriate strength and the most tricky angle to swing her sword. Soon more than 10 personal guards were lying on the ground, all of them killed by a single sword strike. The Wolf King pulled out the sword from his waist, ready to fight to the death. Isabella, he shouted. I know. The latter immediately launched her ability, which was a circle of no light that could only be seen by the magic eye. In Isabella's field of vision, the black forbidden areas formed by different gods' stones of retaliation were slightly trembling at their own frequency, like ripples on the surface of the water. She controlled the field to vibrate at the same frequency, and then connected it with the god's stone area. The ripples of the 2 instantly offset each other, and the field became flat and smooth. Zero immediately turned into a dim light, and drilled into the Wolf King's body. When the Wolf King twisted and turned into a pure witch, The Queen of Clearwater showed a look of disbelief. Why can you use your ability in front of the God's Stone of Retaliation? Because the God's Stone is not what you think. Isabella then smoothed out the other side's trembling. But you don't need to know this because it will soon be over. Before her voice fell, Zero once again rushed towards Garcia Wimbledon. To be continued. Chapter 3:14. It had been a long time since she had felt such warm sunshine. Garcia stood in the garden and took a deep breath. The smell of rosemary floated into her nose along with the breeze. This was not the kingdom of eternal winter. In the far north, there was nothing but cold wind, frozen soil, and fragrant winter flowers. In the backyard of the castle, there were always pieces of meat and intestines waiting to be dried, and the strong fishy smell lingered in the air. This was also not the port of Clearwater. The wind did not carry the familiar salty and humid smell, and even if she closed her eyes, she could not hear the sound of the sea rushing up to the beach. This was the palace of Grey Castle, she thought. But it was a little different from what she remembered. Garcia sat down beside the central flower pond and stroked the slightly rough stone bricks. When she was a child, she had fallen while playing hide-and-seek here. Her forehead had hit the edge of the flower pond and blood had flowed all over her face. Her father had knocked away all the stone bricks and replaced them with smooth cobblestones. In this way, although she could no longer trip and hurt people, she could no longer use it as a cover to hide. At that time, she remembered that in addition to herself, there were also Gerald and Timothy. When they saw their sister fall, they were all frightened. In order to coax her to stop crying, they even imitated their own fall and deliberately hit their heads against the edge of the flower pond. Of course, after that, they were beaten by her father. It was a part of the past that Garcia had thought she would never recall. It was like a secret buried under a tree, buried deep in the ground. But when she returned to the old place, she found that this scene had not faded in the slightest. Even after digging it out from the soil, it was still vivid. Everything seemed to have returned to her childhood. So this is your world. A strange voice sounded from behind her. As a place of rest, it is a good choice. Garcia turned around and saw a woman in white walking out from behind the flower pond. She had a pair of light red eyes and snow-white long hair. Her facial features were so exquisite that they seemed to have been carefully carved. Her voice was ethereal and pleasant, as if she was an angel who had fallen into the mortal world. The Queen of Clearwater's face was completely gloomy. You are a witch of the church. My name is Zero. The word which doesn't suit me. She chuckled. I am called a pure witch. I am different from those who have fallen. Pure witch? It's just a plaything raised by the church, Garcia said coldly. What kind of trick is this? Is your ability to create illusions? She suddenly picked up a stone and squeezed it in her hand. It's just an illusion. None of this can fool me. The queen's roar traveled far away, but the scene in front of her did not change. The stone did not shatter in response to her roar. Instead, her skin was cut by the hard edges. Spreading out his hand, he felt a sharp pain from the wound. It was clear and real. I can see that you're not completely ignorant of witch's abilities. This makes things much easier. Zero lifted the corner of her skirt and slightly bowed. Welcome to the world of consciousness. I call it the soul battlefield. We will fight here, and the winner will get everything, and the loser will lose everything, just like the oracle recorded in the holy book. Soul battlefield? Garcia was startled. Suddenly, she felt a heart-wrenching pain coming from her chest. Zero pulled out a spear from nowhere and pierced it directly into her chest. Her breathing suddenly became difficult. She opened her mouth to shout, but no sound came out. Zero twisted the spear and fiercely pulled it back. Blood spurted out from the tip of the spear and soon, half of her body was soaked. Garcia knelt on the ground and trembled, trying to cover the wound. The massive loss of blood gradually made her consciousness blur. The next moment, she found herself still standing in the same place, her body intact. The shadow was standing a few meters away from her, as if he had never left the place. What happened? Garcia gasped for air. Illusion. She covered her violently heaving chest. The place where she had been pierced was still aching. Lowering her head, she saw a large pool of blood sprayed out from under her feet. This is the basic rule. Your consciousness is not immortal. Zero spread out her hands. The pain of every death is real to you. It will consume your spirit and physical strength. When this feeling is beyond what you can bear, the real sleep will come. Every time you die, your body will return to its original state. An average person can withstand 3 to 4 times at most. Of course, I have also seen many strong-willed people who can endure 7 or 8 times, or even more, she gently explained. Although I am looking forward to your performance, I can understand if you give up resistance. After all, continuous death is also an unbearable torment for me. Choosing to escape at this time is not a cowardly act, especially when the end has already been decided. After saying this, she dropped the spear in her hand, and once again pulled out a big sword from her back. She jumped straight up and slashed at Garcia. The latter's eyes widened. The pure witch is wearing a white robe, so it is impossible for her to hide such a huge weapon. Those weapons are all made out of thin air? Zero's words suddenly flashed in her mind. So this is your world. I call it the soul battlefield. Your consciousness is not immortal. It is real to you. The big sword slashed down, but it did not split the Queen of Clearwater in two. Instead, it hit a large iron shield. The huge rebound force made it impossible for Zero to hold the sword hilt. The big sword was sent flying, and her body was forced to retreat several steps. Garcia also fell to the ground because of this powerful slash. The end is decided? She clenched her teeth and sneered twice. You said before, this is my world, right? While speaking, she turned over and climbed up. A crossbow suddenly appeared in her hand, and she raised it to shoot at the other side. At the same time, a cross rose behind Zero, firmly trapping her body. The crossbow arrow instantly entered the pure witch's abdomen. She suddenly showed a painful expression, gasped twice, and then slowly opened her mouth. I am surprised, cough cough. If it was an ordinary person, it would be very difficult to accept all of this, let alone mobilize their consciousness to fight back. You are indeed the Queen of Clearwater, who gave Sermaine a headache. Thank you for the compliment. Garcia picked up the spear that fell to the ground. If it weren't for your nonsense, I wouldn't have been able to understand the wonders of the world of consciousness so quickly. Next, how many holes should I poke in your body? She smiled with difficulty. Do as you wish. When Garcia stabbed the pure witch for the 10th time, she finally died. She deliberately avoided the fatal spots, and started from the limbs and abdomen. At first, Zero would let out an unbearable scream of pain, but later on, her voice gradually became lower. Next, this guy should be able to recover, right? However, this was the palace of Grey Castle, her home field. Since she could change the environment and objects at will, it was impossible for her to lose. Sure enough, a white light flashed on the pure witch's body, and in the blink of an eye, the wound disappeared. Zero once again opened her light red eyes. Garcia raised her spear, ready to send her to her death, but a sudden change occurred. She saw the pure witch's hands, which were bound by the cross, easily break free from the rope, kick the handle, and in the blink of an eye, close to her side, raised her hands and swung. Before Garcia could react, she had already lost all feeling in her body. The headless body fell with a loud bang, and the other side's hands were empty. How is this possible? After a few breaths, the Queen of Clearwater covered her neck, and took 2 steps back in bewilderment. Just now, she used her arms to cut off her neck? Looking at the broken hemp rope on the cross and the blood on her hands, it was obvious that the previous scene was not an illusion. If you can't understand the nature of consciousness, how can I face a real battle? Zero smiled. Moreover, you seem to be very puzzled. How can I break free from a rope as thick as a finger? In fact, it's not difficult to understand. The winner gets everything, the loser loses everything. Among the people I devoured, there is a type of witch who is exceptionally strong. They have infinite strength, agile skills, and are not afraid of the influence of God's stone of retaliation. You may not know, but the church has a special name for them, extraordinary. She spread her hands. Just using conventional means is not enough to defeat me. If you want to survive, you have to double your efforts. Now it's my turn. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 315. For the first time, Garcia witnessed the horror of an extraordinary. Her weapon was just an ordinary one-handed sword, but every move she made was so oppressive that it could take one's soul away. Every hit on the shield was as heavy as a two-handed sword. After 2 or 3 hits, Garcia could no longer raise her arms, and then her chin was smashed by a slash from the bottom up. After recovering, the Queen of Clearwater completely abandoned her defense. In a flash, a bed crossbow appeared in front of her. She pulled the trigger, but instead of an iron spear, she shot several jars of Styx black water. Zero swung her sword to cut down the jars, but was drenched by the black water. The evil fire crystals soaked in the jars came into contact with the air, and quickly burned, turning the pure witch into a pillar of fire. But the next move didn't work. The opponent used a speed far beyond that of an ordinary person to quickly move around the flower pond, and the bed crossbow simply couldn't turn around. Garcia could only rely on the stone walls and iron railings covered with spikes to stop the pure witch's movement, turning the flower pots placed in the garden into explosives filled with snow powder, and sometimes the ground would suddenly sink, forming a fatal trap. In this way, after killing the opponent several times, Garcia found that her breathing gradually became heavy, beads of sweat slid down her forehead, and the waves of dizziness in her head almost made her unable to stand. Well done. The reborn Zero didn't take advantage of the situation to attack, but instead clapped her hands. You being able to do this is already beyond my expectations, but I forgot to tell you, although in this world you can use your own consciousness to change the environment and place, but it consumes far more energy than creating things out of thin air, even comparable to resurrection. You should be able to feel the weakness and exhaustion of your body. Maybe the next time you die, it will be a complete and eternal sleep. Ha, that's still better than stretching out your neck to be killed, Garcia gasped a few times. And you seem to have forgotten the screams you made when you were burned by the evil fire. How many times did you die this round? 3 times or 4 times? I don't think you can last longer than me. Zero was silent for a moment before opening her mouth. Since I became a pure, the church has made a lot of preparations for me, from gaining knowledge, learning fighting skills, to feeding the army of judges to improve my ability. The judgment warriors knew that they would be sacrificed, but they still stepped into the soul battlefield. In the realm of consciousness, they tempered my skills by fighting to the death. Then, they accepted death with peace of mind and passed on their understanding and experience to me. Garcia did not interrupt her. Perhaps the other party was stalling for time, but she did need to rest for a while. I even devoured an extraordinaire. Her power was terrifying, and I was almost defeated in the battle of souls. But in the end, I relied on the devil's weapon to defeat her, and obtained everything she had. Due to the different nature of magic, I was unable to truly transform into an extraordinary, nor was I able to display the abilities of the other witches who had been engulfed. However, in the world of consciousness, these were not difficult matters. After that, very few people could threaten me. In these 200 years, I had devoured so many that even I couldn't remember how many people I had devoured. I've experienced every pain, joy, sorrow, and joy in this world. She paused. Even death. What are you trying to say? Garcia frowned. The difference between you and me, Zero replied calmly. The superposition of many souls has made my will incomparably strong. If measured by the number of deaths, I think I can withstand at least 100 deaths. I'll help you verify it. She sneered twice, but her heart sank. The other party's demeanor did not seem to be bluffing. When she had cleanly killed the guards at the dock, it could be seen that the pure witch indeed possessed fighting skills that did not match her age. If that's the case, then I must have a more powerful weapon. Quickly think, what kind of weapon can easily kill an experienced extraordinary witch? The battle of souls is not a contest of imagination. Zero seemed to have seen through her thoughts. You can't make yourself invulnerable out of thin air, nor can you summon those earth-shattering weapons from ancient legends. You can't create things that you haven't experienced. What you see and know is the key to victory. I'll cover the entire garden with strong snow powder, so that you won't be able to hide, Garcia said coldly. Even if I die, at least I can drag you down with me. Even if the result is meaningless. The pure witch looked at her with pity. In that case, I'll show you the true power of the church. Beams of red light appeared behind Zero, and then condensed into a hideous and terrifying chariot. Its body was so huge that it directly crushed the garden wall. The two metal spears protruding from the top of her head reminded Garcia of the report of the Wolf King's guards. A kind of ballista that she had never seen before was attacking the city wall. Both its range and power were unprecedented. Could it be that the guards were talking about this behemoth in front of her? Then she heard a buzzing sound. The thick spear directly passed through the layers of obstacles set by Garcia, and effortlessly tore her into two halves. When her body flew backward, she could still see her organs and blood spilling out. The chariot continuously launched unstoppable spears, but after recovering, it quickly repeated the same death. She did not even have the time to create snow powder to perish together with the enemy. The continuous pain made her consciousness gradually blurred. The earth began to tremble, cracks appeared in the sky, and under the thunder and lightning, the garden was set ablaze. A strong will can only delay failure, but it can't change the result. Zero closed her eyes. You've persevered long enough. Rest in peace. As soon as her voice fell, the whole world collapsed. It's over. Isabella curled her lips. Shouldn't it be over in an instant? You've obviously changed back to your original appearance, but you didn't say a word for a long time. I thought you really failed. I found some interesting things in her memory. Zero opened her eyes. These ideas make me feel a little emotional. Oh, there's actually something that makes you emotional? Isabella said carelessly. That strange alchemy powder. You should have found it, right? Yes, the alchemists call it strong snow powder. Its composition is quite simple, and it's common in the workshop. That's good. Hurry back to the Holy City and report to His Holiness O'Brien. She exhaled. The battle here will continue for at least 3 or 4 days. But without the leader and the witches, the remnants are no longer a threat to the gods' punishment army. Let's go. Zero nodded. Wait. Isabella stopped her. What's wrong? Is it an illusion? Her appearance is obviously the same as before, but why do I always feel that there is something different in her light red eyes? Isabella carefully looked at her for a moment, then shook her head. No. Nothing. Maybe I'm thinking too much. To be continued. Chapter 316. In the Lord's Hall of Border Town, a grand celebration banquet was being held. In addition to the witches, all the high-ranking members of the City Hall and the First Army were present, including Bear of Mons and Carter Lannis, who were originally nobles, and Iron Axe and Kyle Sichi, who were born as commoners. Especially the latter. It took Roland a lot of persuasion to pull him out of the laboratory to participate in this, in his words, meaningless banquet. In order to let the people feel the same way, in addition to the public speech, he also ordered the kitchen to bake a large batch of white bread with the refined starch left over from the production of explosives, and distributed it to the people of Border Town. As long as they had an ID card, they could receive a limited amount of delicious food from the City Hall. While the First Army was on their way home, most of the people in the town already knew of the victory of the battle. Of course, they might not understand the purpose and meaning of this expedition, but as long as there was free bread, it was a day worth celebrating. This was also the first time that Roland imitated King City's style of holding an elegant banquet. There was no barbecue or large pieces of stew. All the food was cut into small pieces and served on white plates. There was a variety of seasonings placed on the side, which could be dipped according to their own taste, similar to the buffet restaurants of later generations. Welcome back. He carried 2 glasses of fruit wine towards Anna. You must have worked hard on the road. You've already said the same thing at the dock. Anna took the wine glass, and my answer was still the same, it wasn't hard. The glasses slightly touched, the girl's eyes were filled with a sweet smile. Roland resisted the urge to hug her on the spot, and then raised his glass to the other witches to celebrate. What about me? What about me? Lightning shouted. You also have a share. Roland called the waiter who served the wine. Took a glass of cider. You've worked hard. I want to drink white. The little girl raised her head and said. He thought for a moment, and finally agreed to the other side's request. This little devil was always very curious. If he kept refusing, maybe she would learn from Nightingale and quietly sneak into the kitchen to steal wine to drink. Okay, but only one glass. Just as Roland handed her a glass of low-alcohol white wine with ice and grape juice, she suddenly leaned over and kissed him on the cheek. Ahem. Is this the fjord's etiquette again? That's right. Lightning nodded vigorously. My father said so. Since it wasn't the first time they had seen this, the witches didn't find it too strange. Instead, Sylvie and the others widened their eyes, and then looked at Roland with accusatory eyes, making the latter turn his head away rather awkwardly. Was there really such an etiquette in the fjords for kissing the leader during a victory party? Next was a toast to his subordinates. When it was the chief alchemist's turn, he leaned over and asked in a low voice, Your Royal Highness, I have read the intermediate chemistry that you gave me twice, but there are still many parts that I don't understand. It talks about the microscopic composition of matter. This part involves a lot of physics knowledge. You'll have to read another book. Roland pointed out. I suggest that you first read the entire elementary physics, and then read the incomplete chemistry book from the beginning, so that many of your doubts can be answered. I also plan to do so, but... He hesitated. Your Royal Highness, why does the cover of each ancient book have a different color? Do they have any special meaning? Well, Roland pondered for a moment. The color represents its level and the difficulty of obtaining it. Is that so? Kyle said thoughtfully. From green to purple, it seems that the darker the color, the more mysterious the knowledge, so the advanced chemistry must be black. No, it's orange. Kyle was startled. Why? Roland smiled. Who knows? Halfway through the banquet, he walked out of the hall and came to the castle terrace. Under the gentle evening breeze, Roland couldn't help but feel a trace of coolness. Half of autumn had passed, and he realized that it wouldn't be long before the long winter brought by the months of demons would cover the entire western region. However, this year was completely different from the previous year. The trade with the Marjorie Chamber of Commerce had brought a lot of liquidity. In addition to exchanging these golden dragons for food and materials, a considerable part of it was distributed to the people in the form of salaries. According to the statistics of the convenience market, the sales of various goods had increased a lot recently, and some goods that could significantly improve the quality of life, such as steaks and eggs, were growing very rapidly. There was no doubt that this was a sign that the living standards of the people were gradually improving. In particular, the natives had new free housing, and their salaries had increased a lot compared to the past. They began to try to buy food that they could usually only enjoy during festivals. The newly introduced population was still at the stage of saving money to buy a house. When they could settle down, the market would inevitably usher in a new peak of sales. In the end, what did the people need? Sometimes, as long as they had enough to eat and drink, they would be grateful to the Lord and follow him until their death. In this era, most of the civilians were easily satisfied. Your Royal Highness, be careful not to catch a cold. Nightingale appeared behind him, holding a thin leather coat in her hand. She threw the coat to Roland, took out a piece of dried fish, and stood beside him. What are you thinking about here? Nothing, he smiled and put on the coat. I just suddenly wanted to see my territory. The town seems to be very lively. Nightingale pointed in the direction of the brightly lit square. It's already evening, but there are still so many people who haven't gone home. Because today is the first day of the new play Dawn. Roland smiled. It's also the first time the troupe has returned to the town after a few months. The people probably can't wait to see Miss May and Ms. Irene again. But then again, Miss May would soon become Ms. May Lannis. He really didn't expect that his chief knight would act so quickly and take the star of the western region into his hands. When the other side mentioned it to him with a sincere face, he was stunned for a while before he reacted. The wedding of the chief knight required the approval of the loyal lord, and Roland naturally had no objection to this kind of thing. Finally, the wedding date was set after the end of the months of the demons, which was the day when Border Town was officially built. When I first sneaked into the town, it was still a dead place. Nightingale sighed. Now, even standing in the castle, I can feel their joy. Life is always getting better day by day. Roland raised his head, looked at the bright, cloudless night sky, and took a deep breath. He still had a lot to do, such as expanding the scope of education, establishing public health care, strengthening cultural construction, encouraging childbirth, and so on. These would all be transformed into a solid force in the western region, and lay the foundation for the unification of Grey Castle. What about us? Nightingale asked with a sly look in her eyes. Of course, Roland patted her head. I promise. Yes, your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 3:17. Seeing that His Royal Highness had left, Lightning pulled Maggie to a corner of the hall. Goo. Her hair was almost touching the ground, and when she moved she looked like a floating ghost. Pushing aside the white hair that covered her cheeks, Maggie's cheeks were bulging, and her mouth was still holding a piece of pork chop that she hadn't swallowed. I found an interesting place, whispered Lightning. It's in the concealing forest, and I plan to explore it tomorrow. Do you want to come with me? Gulp. Maggie swallowed the food in her mouth and nodded again and again. Okay, what do you need to prepare? 3 things for the expedition. No, 3 things that are most commonly used. Lightning found that when she spoke, she would occasionally use some strange words that His Royal Highness Roland often used. A fire sickle, dry food, and a dagger. The distance isn't far, and you only need to bring enough food for a day. Don't fill your pockets like last time. Okay, Goo. Maggie patted her chest and was ready to leave, but Lightning stopped her. Remember, this expedition is our secret. You can't tell anyone else, the little girl said. Tomorrow morning we will set off. Looking at Maggie's back, who couldn't wait to go to the table, she curled her lips and began to think about tomorrow's plan. Although the bomb was a success and didn't disappoint His Royal Highness's expectations, she found that her flying was far less flexible than before, as if something was restricting her movements. As long as she raised her speed, Lightning felt as if there was always a devil chasing her from behind. This was an obstacle brought by fear. She realized that the source was the trip to the stone tower. After seeing the frightening figure at the basement door, she lost her calm and calmness, and only wanted to escape from here as soon as possible. After that, she began to doubt her identity as an explorer. Fear wasn't terrible. What was terrible was the unknown. If she wanted to overcome it, she had to get close to it first. In her heart, Lightning silently recited her father's teachings. Tomorrow she might encounter real danger, but an explorer shouldn't be afraid of danger, let alone retreat. If she couldn't overcome this, she was afraid that it would be difficult for her to fly freely in the future. This was also the reason why Lightning decided to hide it from His Highness Roland and act on her own. According to His Highness's plan, the exploration of the stone tower would be arranged after the months of demons, and at that time, the first army and the witches would be dispatched. She was worried that at that time, even if she visited the stone tower again, it would be difficult for her to have the idea of conquering fear. She would have to rely on the courage of the crowd to approach the dangerous place. It could not be called an adventure at all. His Highness might scold her and confiscate her ice cream, and her sisters in the Witch Union would be worried about her, but she still made up her mind. As the daughter of Thunder, the greatest explorer of the fjords, Lightning could not accept herself as a coward. However, this decision did not mean that she acted recklessly. Compared to a few months ago when she was unprepared, she now had a revolver given by His Highness, a better understanding of the demons, and Maggie by her side. Especially the last point. If they really encountered a group of demons in the tower, even if Maggie couldn't turn into a demonic beast to drive away the enemies, she could at least take her and escape. Explorers don't need a large group of people to boost their courage, she thought, but they can have a few trustworthy teammates. After the banquet, Lightning put the honey meat she had saved up into a cloth bag, followed by weapons, torches and water bags. The successful completion of the bombing mission had given her some confidence back, and His Highness's encouragement and the slight stubble on her cheeks had doubled her courage. Striking the iron while it was hot, tomorrow was the best time to leave. Early in the morning, she flew to the top of the castle, where Maggie was squatting on top of the wall waiting for her. Check your bag. I've brought everything you told me, Goo. She changed back to her original appearance, and opened the backpack that was slung across her waist for the little girl to check. This time the bag was filled with less than half of the food, but at least it was filled with a dagger and a fire scythe. Well, this time you're qualified. Let's go. Lightning soared into the sky and flew towards the direction of the concealing forest with the pigeon. This journey had been repeated many times in Lightning's mind. So even if she closed her eyes, she could still find the right direction. Today's weather was slightly gloomy, but it was a lot better than the last time when it was covered with dark clouds. The color blocks that made up the earth slowly moved backwards, and the closer they got to the area of the stone tower, the more nervous Lightning became. You said last night that the interesting place, was it the new eagle's nest? Maggie asked. No, it's much more interesting than that. Lightning shook her head. The goal we're going to explore is an ancient ruin. It's a stone tower that was left behind more than 400 years ago. The basement still hasn't collapsed. Maybe we can find some ancient books that describe the situation at that time. Ancient books? Maggie shook her wings. It doesn't sound as interesting as digging out eagle eggs goo. An eagle's nest has at most 2 or 3 eggs. You can eat them up in a few bites, the little girl said patiently. If you can really find such books and bring them back to His Highness Roland, he'll definitely be willing to reward you with a basket of eggs, whether it's boiled or steamed. You can eat 3 eggs a day for a long time. Really? Maggie suddenly became spirited. Then let's hurry to find the ancient books. Ooh. Near noon, the two successfully arrived above the destination. Half of the stone tower covered with vines and moss still stood in the forest. Everything around it looked the same as a few months ago. Nothing had changed. Lightning descended, flew around the stone tower, and after confirming that it was safe, gently landed. Is it here, Goo? The pigeon lay on her head and shouted. Shoo! Lightning made a gesture to keep quiet. In the quiet forest, their voices were particularly noisy. Speak quietly, there may be demons here. Demons? Maggie's tail immediately stood up. You wait for me up there, she pointed to the top of the broken tower and said in a low voice. I'll go and explore the situation first. Stepping on the gradually withering grass, there was a slight rustling sound under her feet. The entrance of the stone tower was not blocked by the plants again, and Lightning could still see a small cluster of vines that she had cut with her dagger last time. She held her breath, went into the tower according to the original route, and approached the basement passage in the center of the tower little by little. Looking at the dark staircase in front of her, she could even hear her heart beating fast. Fear comes from the unknown. Overcome fear. Approach the unknown. The little girl kept encouraging herself in her heart, lit a torch, and walked down the stairs step by step. Walking to the corner of the passage, she sneaked a peek. The collapsed wooden door was already broken, and there was no sign of the demon at the entrance of the basement. Only the deep darkness behind the door was left, like a big mouth that was about to devour someone. At this moment, she heard a voice floating over from the darkness. It was faintly discernible, but it was extremely familiar. Lightning could not help but shiver, and all the hair on her body stood up in an instant. She almost could not restrain the urge to turn around and run away. She clenched her teeth, suppressed the surging fear in her heart, covered her mouth, and listened again. This time the voice was much clearer, and the tone was exactly the same as the last time. Help me. To be continued. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 318. Lightning felt goosebumps all over her body. She suddenly remembered the stories that had been circulated among explorers. The demons that crawled out of the abyss, the ghosts that died with resentment, or the undead that lingered. All of them were the nightmares of explorers. Even if they looked into each other's eyes, they could take away a person's life. Illusions and deceptions were their best tricks. Was there such a monster hidden in the ruins? Although Thunder said that these stories were just nonsense made up by some third-rate explorers, she still felt shaken at this moment. Otherwise, who else would be able to shout continuously for months under the siege of the demons without changing the pitch and interval of his shouts? She was now faced with a dilemma. If it was really a legendary evil creature that had killed all the demons, it seemed that she couldn't escape the misfortune of trespassing. But if it really persisted until now, then the demons should still be in the ruins. What should she do? After hesitating for a moment, She decided to fly back to discuss with Maggie. After briefly explaining the situation, Maggie raised her head and said, "We can extinguish the torch and sneak in quietly, so that the demons can't see us." But we can't see them either. I can become an owl." The pigeon rubbed against her face. "No matter how dark the night is, it can't stop me, Lightning's eyes lit up. "That's a good idea, but those legendary evil creatures live in the dark all their lives. There must be a way to find their prey, right? Otherwise, they should have starved to death. Didn't you say that they were all made up by others to scare people?" "Not me, it's my dad," the little girl corrected. "It's all the same. Anyway, I've never heard of immortal monsters in Grey Castle, If they are really so terrible, they shouldn't just stay in a small place like the fjords, right?" Maggie's body emitted a light, and the pigeon suddenly swelled up and turned into a gray-brown owl, eyes full of eagerness. "I thought you would be very interested in these legends." "That's right. A qualified explorer would never let go of a chance to verify a legend. Moreover, she still had a mental barrier to overcome. If she fled now, all her previous efforts would be in vain." Lightning hesitated for a moment, and decided to do as Maggie said. "But, wait a minute. I came here because I had to overcome my fear, so why is he so interested in exploring the ruins? Could it be? You're so impatient. Don't tell me it's because of the basket of eggs?" The owl blinked its big round eyes and turned its head away. Once again standing at the entrance of the basement, Lightning took a few deep breaths, held the revolver tightly in her hand, and quietly walked into the deep darkness. Perhaps because Maggie was squatting on her shoulder, she felt much calmer than before. The ground felt damp to the touch, and from time to time, there would be a puddle of water. This place was located in a low-lying area, so the rainwater that fell into the tower would slowly gather downwards. Although there were underground drains in most basements, after hundreds of years of wind and rain, these drains would probably have been blocked long ago. Maggie patted her head with her wings, which meant that there was a staircase in front of her. Lightning slowed down her pace, slowly probed the edge of the staircase, and then carefully went down. After turning a corner, she suddenly saw light. Soft yellow light came from the end of the staircase and shone on the ground, reflecting sparkling light. After looking carefully, she found that the slightly shaking ground was actually a pool of dirty water. According to the door frame that was half submerged in water, she could see that the water at the bottom of the basement was probably knee-deep. She carefully walked to the junction of the staircase and the water, and with her feet off the ground, she slowly floated to the door and looked inside. She saw an empty space inside the door. The underground space of the stone tower was unbelievably large, far larger than the part above ground. She didn't see a burning torch. The yellow light came from the inlaid stones on the wall. They roughly outlined the outline of the basement, and also allowed Lightning to see everything in the room. There was a stone platform in the middle of the room, and on it stood several figures. From the shell on their back and the burly figure, she could see that they were undoubtedly demons. Fortunately, the demons hadn't noticed the movement near the door. Instead, they were holding spears and shields, surrounding a square blue stone pillar. At this time, the cry for help was getting clearer, as if it was ringing in her ears. Help me, Lightning swallowed. What should she do next? "We go and save her, Maggie whispered in her ear. "What?" The little girl was startled. "But there are several demons there. We can't beat them." She felt the palm of her hand holding the gun was full of sweat. "If Sister Nightingale was here, it would be no problem, but I can't do it alone." "Are those the demons you were talking about?" Maggie tilted her head and said, "They seem to be dead, "What are they dead?" Before her voice died away, Maggie had already leaped into the air and flew towards the platform. Lightning was so scared that she froze in place for a moment, and even forgot to reach out to hold her back. Before she could react, she had already thrown herself on a demon. Lightning had no choice but to grit her teeth, raise her gun, and silently recite the shooting essentials that Nightingale had taught her. The result was a surprising scene. The demon that was pecked twice by the owl suddenly collapsed like a weather-beaten broken stone, turning into a pile of flying ash in the blink of an eye. What's going on?" Lightning landed beside Maggie, and looked at the other 3 demons in surprise. Under the illumination of the yellow light, their bodies were densely covered with fine cracks, and there were traces of spider webs between their legs. Through their ferocious skulls, one could see that their eyeballs and skin were grayish-white, and there was not a trace of life in them at all. So that's why, she thought. The owl's vision is several times better than mine in dim light, so that's why Maggie said those words. But before she could relax, Lightning's eyes were completely attracted by something else. In the middle of the platform surrounded by demons, stood a huge cube. From a distance, it looked like a stone pillar, but when she looked closely, she found that it was actually transparent. Wrapped in the cubic crystal was a woman in a gorgeous robe. Her eyes were closed, her hands were open, and her long blue hair was spread out behind her, as if it was still floating in the wind. Is this a witch coup? Maggie flew above the crystal and pecked fiercely. This time it didn't shatter, instead, it made a crisp knocking sound. So hard coup? I don't know, murmured Lightning. She put her hand on the crystal, and felt a cold chill through her skin. The surface of the crystal was covered with a thick layer of dust. Obviously, the woman had been in this sarcophagus for a long time. Her expression was lifelike, and her tightly knitted eyebrows were raised. She looked a little flustered, but more anxious and worried. Save me. The voice came from behind the crystal again. To be continued. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 319. Roland moved the quill pen, and quickly wrote a paragraph of text on the paper. Before coming here, he had been drawing mechanical drawings on the computer all day, so he thought he would rarely have the opportunity to write with a pen. He did not expect to use this ancient way of writing again. There were 2 documents next to him, both of which were the plans he planned to implement. One was the large-scale production of sulfuric acid. The new equipment had already been manufactured by Anna and Soroya. The lead reactor had been replaced with a more solid and reliable iron shell with an anti-corrosive coating. It was 3 times larger than the previous experimental version. Considering that at the present stage there was no way to collect or purify the production waste gas, mainly from sulfur combustion and nitrogen oxide leakage, Roland set it up at the southern end of the industrial park, far away from the Redwater River and the residential area. He also planned to build a factory around the reactor, erect a chimney, and raise the height of the exhaust gas emission. Since increasing the production of sulfuric acid was of great help to expand the production scale of concentrated nitric acid, putting the equipment into production was the most important task at present. The content of the document was to order Kyle Sichi to select a group of disciples to be specialized in the production of sulfuric acid. Barov also needed to recruit some reliable local residents to act as assistant handymen. The entire chemical plant would have around 100 people in the first phase. The second document was to establish a public medical system. To be honest, Roland was not familiar with this field, and he knew nothing about modern medicine. However, this did not prevent him from developing a simple plan that met the current needs with his common sense. First of all, the biggest role of this department was to publicize and popularize science. For example, water should be boiled before drinking, meat should be cooked before eating, the cause of illness and the way to deal with it, the difference between parasites and microorganisms, and so on. Thanks to his growing prestige, it was not difficult to make the people do something according to his requirements. However, if he wanted them to understand why they had to do it, he needed someone to specially carry out publicity and education. This kind of thing was useless to say once, so he would repeat it 7 or 8 times, or even dozens of times. It was like a slogan hanging in the field. The more he said it, the more people would slowly accept this point of view. Secondly, it was to encourage childbirth. City Hall had limited manpower, and he was not willing to set up a separate family planning department, so he temporarily included this in the public medical system. Population was always the most scarce resource in this era. It was naturally best for the people to have more children. Nana's ability made up for a series of thorny problems such as the risk of childbirth. With her, the postpartum survival rate could almost reach 100%. In addition, in order to prevent the abandonment of female babies and the occurrence of only giving birth without raising them, He formulated a detailed subsidy and punishment policy. For example, the subsidy for female babies was slightly higher than that for male babies. The subsidy would be paid in installments, and abandoned babies would face fines and imprisonment. The last point was to be responsible for collecting fees. In addition to fertility treatment, the hospital would charge a certain fee based on how much magic power Nana consumed. This would not only reduce the burden on the little girl, but also lay the foundation for the future hospital system. Roland had already decided on the first person in charge of the department. It was Nana's father, Viscount Pine. The third document was the one he was currently writing. It was also the most complex and enormous plan for the construction of Border Town. It involved the implementation of the expansion of Border Town and the merger of Longsong Stronghold. When the time came, it was certain that a series of universal laws would be promulgated to govern the people of both places. The judicial system and the public security system would also have to be complemented. If he wanted to write this content flawlessly, it was certainly not enough to rely on his own knowledge. Roland intended to first draw up a draft, and then discuss the other details with the City Hall's director, Barov. After writing the first part, he stretched his sore wrists and walked to the French window. Today's weather was very gloomy. In the morning he didn't see the sun, and in the afternoon, the sky was covered with dark clouds. It seemed that a heavy rain was brewing. The slightly chilly autumn wind swept through the castle's back garden, and he could hear the rustling of the olive trees. At this moment, a black dot appeared on the horizon and flew in the direction of the castle. "It's lightning." Nightingale's voice came from behind him. "She probably went to the concealing forest to pick mushrooms again," Roland said with a smile. Usually, when there was no reconnaissance mission, Lightning and Maggie's practice was completely free flight, so it was normal that they didn't return to the castle for lunch. According to the two of them, they often went to the woods to find some bird eggs and beehives, or to catch some strange small animals and roast them to eat. Probably the final form of an explorer would be transformed into Bear Grylls. In addition, although birdbeak mushrooms basically grew on trees, he always couldn't help but think of the story of the little girl who picked mushrooms. "Your Highness, your smile is a bit strange." "Ahem, I thought of an interesting story. Do you want to hear it?" Roland cleared his throat. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who liked to pick mushrooms while counting. Wait. The shadow grew bigger and bigger. Unexpectedly, it didn't fly over the castle, but instead descended and rushed straight to the office's French window. Roland was startled and reached out to open the window. Lightning rushed into the room without hesitation. Your Highness." As soon as she landed, she shouted excitedly, "I found a witch." "A witch?" Roland asked curiously. "Where?" "In the stone tower of the concealing forest." Lightning pointed to Maggie, who had just flown into the office. "She can testify." "Cuckoo." Maggie raised her head. "Stone tower?" He frowned. "What happened? Tell me in detail." After listening to Lightning's description, Roland couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. This girl was too bold. She actually dared to explore the ancient ruins of the Devil with a pigeon. But what was more frightening was that there was actually a witch sealed in the ruins. Of course, it could also be an ordinary person sealed by a witch. In any case, this was incredible news. "What's with the cry for help?" "It's this thing. I found it on the table behind her." Lightning took out a palm-sized iron box from her pocket. At first glance, it looked like a small makeup mirror. Opening the lid, he saw a red gem embedded inside. She pulled the trigger next to the gem, and an anxious female voice suddenly appeared in everyone's ears. "Help me." Roland immediately shuddered. The voice seemed to be far and near at the same time, and it was really a bit creepy. If he had heard such a cry for help coming from the dark basement, he would definitely turn around and leave without saying a word. "There's magic in the gem," Nightingale appeared and said in amazement. "I can see a weak magic vortex, just like the one inside a witch's body." Well, it seemed that it was a magic player that could continue to make sound. The possibility that the other party was a witch had increased by one. "Are there other stones like this in the basement of the stone tower?" "I didn't look carefully. Many parts of the room were flooded." Lightning shook her head. "At that time, I just wanted to come back early to tell you the news." Don't do this again, especially if you go to a dangerous place without permission. Roland patted her head, then looked at Nightingale. Call all members of the Witch Union and Iron Axe to the office. The plan to search for the ruins may have to be carried out in advance. Yes, your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 320. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Sure, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. After everyone had arrived, Roland told them everything that Lightning had found. A transparent crystal coffin in an ancient ruin, no signs of decay in the damp basement, a magic gem that kept crying for help, and a demon that turned into ashes. What do you think? Are you trying to say that she might be a witch? Anna pondered. If she's still alive, she might be able to learn more about what happened 400 years ago. It's also possible that she isn't a witch or even doesn't belong to that era. Scroll hesitated for a moment. And she might not be on our side, Leaf added. This sentence made Roland slightly stunned. Indeed, if the ruins were left behind by the church, the person was likely to be a member of the church. Judging from the luxurious clothing described by Lightning, he might even be a high-ranking member. It would be fine if it was an ordinary person, but if it was a witch, it would be tricky to deal with it. From the fight between Ashes and Nightingale to the attack of the Faceless One, it could be seen that there was no clear dividing line between the fighting power of the witches. Without wearing a god's stone of retaliation, an extraordinary might not be able to compete with an ordinary witch with a unique ability. And if a combat witch was attacked by an auxiliary witch, the situation would be equally worrying. No one could guarantee that her ability would not pose a threat to the Witch Union in case she was malicious. Unless she was awakened within the range of the god's stone of retaliation. Are you all crazy? Are you even considering whether she is on our side? Lily held her forehead weakly. How could a person from 400 years ago live to this day? Witches have always had a short lifespan. Even extraordinaires who have strengthened their bodies can't live for more than 100 years. You're thinking too much. If you ask me, maybe when that thing breaks, the person inside will turn into dust like the devil. Short life is because of the so-called demonic bite, Roland corrected. Witches generally have stronger physical qualities than the average person, so their actual lifespan should be longer. Most people only live for 40 to 50 years, Lily snorted. Do you think everyone lives as long as a tortoise? The average lifespan of 40 to 50 years was due to the poor food supply and poor medical standards. As long as the quality of life improved, it could increase for another 20 years. However, what she said was not without reason, Roland thought. Even with these, there was still a long way to go before reaching 400 years of life. Even a tortoise might not be able to live that long. But she does seem to be alive, cried Lightning. You'll know when you see her. She's completely different from those dead devils. Her skin is smooth and her lips are full of blood. Maggie. Goo. Lightning is right. All right, stop arguing, Vendi interrupted. Whether she's dead or alive, it's worth a try. Are you sure? Scroll asked with a frown. In case she really is a witch of the church, we just need to hang a god's stone of retaliation on her before she wakes up. Moreover, we still have Anna and Nightingale, so it won't be a problem to control her. Vendi calmly said. The key is that she may know about the accident that happened more than 400 years ago. This alone is worth our rescue. Indeed, the information about the devils was very important to Border Town. Moreover, the information that the church tried to hide would certainly be extremely disadvantageous to them. If they could grasp this information in advance, they might be able to take the initiative in future confrontations. Anna and Nightingale also expressed their agreement with Vendi's view. In this way, even if Scroll felt it was inappropriate, she no longer opposed it. The Witch Union had basically reached a consensus. What about the First Army? Roland looked at Iron Axe. We can only dispatch 50 people at most, Iron Axe said. Your Highness, you've already sent several squads to help City Hall recruit refugees from all over the country. Now there are only 500 soldiers left in Border Town. Although Timothy has been punished by God, he may still stake everything and launch a large-scale attack on the Western Territory. The First Army must leave behind enough people to guard against King's City. I understand, Roland nodded. The scale of 50 people was really a little small. If they were to face a long-range spear attack from the devils outside their field of vision, they would likely suffer heavy losses. In order to make up for this, in addition to Lightning and Maggie's aerial reconnaissance, Sylvie's clairvoyance ability was also indispensable. The ideal team should be a hot air balloon, and the ground troops advancing in tandem. The witches would be responsible for the vigilance and close combat tasks, and the long-range suppression would be handed over to the Flintlock team. But in this way, the witches of Sleeping Island would also know about the existence of sleepers in the ruins. After considering it over and over again, Roland decided to take Sylvie with him. After all, in this rescue mission, ensuring their own safety was still the most important thing. Just as he was about to arrange the rescue plan, Mystery Moon exclaimed in a low voice, "My God, what is that?" Everyone followed her gaze and looked out the window, and couldn't help but be stunned. Roland couldn't believe it and opened the window, only to see the gloomy sky filled with white fairies. They covered the sky and covered the earth, but they didn't make any sound. He stretched out his hand and caught a small handful of white dots. His palm felt cold. It was snowing. This wasn't normal. As far as he knew, the Western Territory only had one snowfall in winter, not to mention that it wasn't even winter yet. Would it also snow in the last month of autumn? He looked at Iron Axe, who looked serious and slowly said, "I've only been in Border Town for 7 or 8 years, and I've never experienced such a situation. Once it snowed, it meant the arrival of the months of the demons, and the sun would be buried under the dark clouds until the next time it shone. And during this time, the entire Western Territory would face the threat of demonic beasts. Not to mention dispatching the First Army. Even transporting the witches by hot air balloon would become dangerous. At this time, the concealing forest was full of ferocious demonic beasts, and leaving the protection of the city walls was definitely an extremely risky thing to do. He had to suspend the rescue plan and wait for the sky to clear up. From the bottom of his heart, he felt that this snow was likely to be an accident, and that it would soon end. After all, the temperature was still at the level of autumn, and hadn't dropped much. 3 days later, Border Town was wrapped in silver, and the distant mountains and forests were covered with a layer of white gauze. In the future, this would definitely be considered a rare beauty, but Roland wasn't in the mood to enjoy the scenery. Although the snow had weakened a lot, there were still some scattered snowflakes falling. The First Army had also entered a state of full alert. The newly built city walls were regularly patrolled every day, and a temporary camp was set up at the foot of the city walls, so that the soldiers could quickly enter the battle. The temperature changed almost every day, and his clothes changed from unlined clothes to a cotton wool coat. On the 4th day, the news from the front made Roland's heart completely sink. The western section of the city walls had been attacked by demonic beasts. The months of the demons had arrived more than a month ahead of schedule. To be continued. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 321. Genius 1 second. Remember, if you want to go? The web, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Fjord's Sleeping Island. I didn't expect that the first guest of Sleeping Spell would be you. Tilly smiled and handed him a cup of hot fish soup. Thanks to your help in exploring the ruins of the Shadow Islands. You're welcome. Thunder took the fish soup. Regarding that mysterious sea, even if I don't pay the commission, I'm willing to go there several times. To be honest, if there are no witches to accompany me, the east of the Shadow Islands is definitely a dangerous forbidden area for explorers. He took a sip of the fish soup, and couldn't help but let out a breath of hot air. Ah, blacktail fish soup is really delicious. Neither black tea nor black tea ale was popular in the fjords. They were used to having a bowl of cold fish jelly in midsummer, and a cup of boiled fish soup when the weather turned cold. Different kinds of fish cooked had very different tastes. This was a custom that Tilly gradually understood after coming to Sleeping Island. That's why you couldn't wait to visit the Sleeping Spell. To be exact, I can't wait to start the next adventure, Thunder said with a forthright smile. The last time I saw the scene in the ruins observation mirror, I was stunned. What was on that land? Why did the stone door appear on the cliff? I couldn't wait to fly over and see. Really? Tilly also poured herself a cup of fish soup. You should know that I intend to go to Border Town in person. I want to have a good talk with the Lord of the Witch Cooperation Association. And I also want to see the months of demons in the western region. Don't you want to go with us? He was silent for a moment, then grinned and said, No, she should have a good life there. This is also good, after all. With this kind of adventure, accidents may happen one day. I lost her mother. I don't want to lose her again. When the time comes, I ask you. I will, Tilly nodded. After all, she is also one of us. She stopped here and smiled. But business is business. Although you have helped us a lot, the price for hiring witches still has to be according to the table. Of course, business is business. This is the tradition of the fjords. Thunder drank the fish soup in one gulp and laughed out loud. Seeing that Thunder had left the palace, Ashes walked in from outside the hall and sat down cross-legged beside Tilly. So who did he hire? Magic servant Molly, any door orbit, and doll shadow. Tilly unfolded the contract. The fee is finally set at 4,800 golden dragon stones. Very generous, right? For 1,000. Ash's jaw dropped. Where did he get so much money? Don't forget, Thunder is the most famous explorer in the fjords, the fifth princess said with a smile. Whether it's the discovery of new routes or the discovery of treasures from various places, they can all bring him a lot of wealth. Because of this, he has the ability to recruit a large group of experienced sailors to accompany him to explore mysterious and dangerous areas. But with a witch, the risk he has to take is greatly reduced. Using money to offset the risk has always been a good deal since ancient times. But is this really good? Ashes said hesitantly. Establishing a bounty guild can indeed bring a lot of wealth to Sleeping Island, but the witch's abilities will also be exposed. If the church hears about it. Sleeping Spell was a new guild established by Tilly. Here, the explorers of the fjords could hire witches with suitable abilities to help them complete their exploration. Of course, in addition to the main projects, it also provided many convenient services, such as repairing damaged items, making some exquisite works of art, quickly building houses, growing flowers, and killing insects. As long as the witches didn't use their abilities to do evil, they would be accepted by Sleeping Spell. Of course, the premise of all this was that the witch's abilities were publicized. Tilly took Ash's hand. Didn't I tell you? I don't care about those golden dragons, but I hope that through the Bounty Guild, more people can understand Sleeping Island and reach a close relationship with us. I agree with Thunder's words that fear comes from the unknown. The same goes for witches. The fear of the Fjords Islanders and the people of the kingdom comes from nothing, but the church's slander and their own ignorance. I can't force them to take the initiative to contact and understand witches, so I can only actively promote myself, telling them that this is not the power of the devil, and that the witch's abilities are not strange and unpredictable. They are awakened from ordinary people, but in essence they are still a member of the human race. When they know more about each other, this fear will disappear. She paused and then continued. As for the church, they never care about what abilities we have. Capturing witches has always been the responsibility of the Judgment Army, and occasionally the God's Punishment Army. In front of the God's Stone of Retaliation, any ability is not much different. I hope what you said is right, Ashes said softly. I only know how to fight and kill, so I can't help you with this. You've already helped me a lot, Tilly smiled. If I want to develop Sleeping Island, the most important thing is to connect with the fjords. Understanding each other is a process, and what I'm doing is just to shorten this process as soon as possible. In addition, the Bounty Guild can also play a special role. She stuck out her tongue and revealed a sly smile. That is to find new uses for some seemingly useless abilities, so that non-combat witches don't have to feel frustrated because their abilities are not useful. Ashes was amused by her expression. You always have so many reasons layer after layer, it's hard not to accept them. Because what I said is right. Tilly curled her lips. Let's change the topic. Maggie still hasn't returned to Sleeping Island. Did something happen there? Maybe she was delayed. Ashes thought for a moment. Or, what? She doesn't want to come back, she shrugged. Compared to the fjords, the living conditions there are much better. I already said not to send witches there. What if Lotus and Honey also don't want to come back? Then let's go, Tilly said. Oh, then I'll go prepare. What? Ashes was stunned for a moment before she came back to her senses. We go there? Princess Tilly curled her lips. Didn't we agree to help him fight against the demonic beasts and bring back the other witches? Without Lotus, next year the immigrants in Crescent Moon Bay won't have a house to live in. But there is still more than a month before winter, so there's no need to go there so soon, right? Chapter 322. Early in the morning, Roland was awakened by the cold. He climbed out of the cold quilt, put on a wool coat, and immersed his feet in a warm bucket of water. This was a corrupt privilege he could only enjoy as a prince. Every morning, the maid would put hot water beside his bed, in addition to a clean towel and hot milk, so that his body could instantly recover its warmth. Of course, compared to the common practice of big nobles, he felt that he was already restrained enough. Originally, Prince Roland had brought the head maid Tyre with this idea, but unfortunately, he didn't get to enjoy it and died. Roland didn't like this practice, so he gave the vacant position to the old maid who was experienced in handling affairs. In fact, this choice was very correct. At present, there were many witches living in the castle, but she still managed to keep the castle in good order inside and outside. The fire in the fireplace had long been extinguished, leaving only white flying ashes. Behind him, a cold wind blew through the gap in the window. It was so cold that it was hard to believe that it was still mid-autumn. Roland dried his feet and washed himself with another basin of hot water. Then he walked to the window and closed it, which had been open all night. Although open fireplaces were very common in this era, he was still worried about the problem of carbon monoxide poisoning, so every night when he slept he would leave a gap. In the first half of the night, the temperature inside could still be maintained in a warm state, but as the firewood burned out, in the early hours of the morning, it was no different from outside. I have to find a way to solve this problem, Roland thought, otherwise, I won't be able to sleep in the future. After breakfast, he took Nightingale, the chief knight, and a group of guards to the city wall area for a routine inspection. There was a large grassland between the old and new walls, but now it had become a vast expanse of white. Walking on the thick snow, the soles of his shoes made crunching sounds. Looking up, the sky was pale gray, and occasionally a snowflake would float into his neck, bringing a trace of coldness. He knew that this weather was likely to last until next spring, or even longer. How is the situation of the defense line? It's much better than the last time. Carter Lannis looked relaxed. Most of the soldiers of the First Army have been to the battlefield, and they also have revolving rifles. A section of the city wall that is about 100 meters long only needs 10 people to guard it, and it's enough to suppress the demonic beasts circling below. Moreover, the new city wall was half a meter taller than the previous stone wall. It would be difficult for the wolves to leap onto the top of the city wall. It was completely a target practice for the soldiers. As long as there are no hybrid demonic beasts, these monsters won't be able to cross the line of defense. That's good. Roland climbed up the city wall. Along the way, the soldiers held their heads high and saluted him. Based on this spirit alone, they were like two different people compared to the militia soldiers from before. At that time, although everyone stood on top of the wall and seemed to thrust their wooden spears in unison, it was only a conditioned reflex formed from repeated training. Their eyes were filled with numbness, and their movements were stiff. If one looked closely, one could even see that most of their legs were trembling slightly. Now, the eyes of the soldiers were filled with confidence. After saluting, they turned their gazes to the front and continued to monitor the battlefield. Walking along the city wall to the side of the concealing forest, Roland found that it was a lot more lively. The temporary residences built for the serfs and the fugitives were arranged in this area. Looking down from the top of the wall, one could see a long slope arranged in parallel, like an undulating wave line. Inside each raised slope, there were more than 10 rooms, and the structure was exactly the same as a cave. The thick soil walls could maintain the indoor temperature, and with the addition of a heating device, a fire bed, and a linen cover, one could keep away from the cold. The entire residential area was divided into two large areas. The area close to the city wall was called the Western District, which was used to house the fugitives. The Eastern District, which was far away from the city wall, was divided into serfs. Every day, the city hall would send people here to distribute food and charcoal, and the fugitives also needed to provide logistics for the First Army guarding the city wall. As for the serfs, most of them had already saved enough wheat for themselves. Except for some of the more active people who went out to look for odd jobs to earn extra money, the others basically rarely left their warm houses. At this moment, at the junction of the Eastern and Western District, a fierce dispute suddenly came. Roland looked towards the direction of the voice, and saw a group of people surrounding the main road in the center of the residential area, arguing loudly about something. One of them was wearing a blue and white uniform, and seemed to be a clerk of the city hall. Soon the quarrel escalated into a fight, and the two groups of people were fighting each other. The scene was chaotic. "Your Highness?" Carter asked. "Let's go take a look," Roland nodded. The group of people arrived at the scene of the disturbance, and the chief knight took the lead, rushing straight into the fighting crowd. In 2 or 3 moves, the most violent people were knocked down to the ground. One after another, Roland's personal guards pulled out their swords and shouted for everyone to stop. The scene was soon under control. After discovering that the person who had arrived was the Lord, the two groups of people simultaneously knelt on the ground. "What's your name?" Roland looked at the clerk who had been punched twice in the face and frowned. "What happened here? Who attacked you first?" "Your Highness, I'm Koya Jarvis," he shouted while covering his face. "It was that damn fugitive who attacked me first, the guy dressed in brown sackcloth. I was still distributing food when he pounced on me like a vicious dog." The fugitive pointed at Koya, raised his head and said, "Your Highness, it's not like what he said. These people colluded with the serfs to extort us. They charged us money for every oatmeal. When you took us in, you clearly said that it would be distributed free of charge." Roland was a little surprised. The fugitives from the eastern region had already been sorted out by the city hall. All the craftsmen, those with special skills, or those who were literate, had been moved to the first ring. It was reasonable to say that the remaining people were ordinary civilians. However, from the tone of his voice and the words he used, it didn't seem like something a civilian would say. In comparison, the member of the city hall, whose mouth was full of insulting words like damn and vicious dog, was really disappointing. Since he had a name, there was an 80 to 90% chance that he was one of Duke Ryan's knights. "I did say that before you were officially incorporated into Border Town, your oatmeal and shelter were free of charge," Roland repeated in front of all the fugitives. "Now these words are still valid. Your Highness is merciful. Long live the Lord." "Thank you, Your Highness." The fugitives kowtowed and shouted. Koya Jarvis's face suddenly became livid. However, fighting and wounding people in the territory is also a violation of the law, especially attacking a member of the city hall. Roland signaled to the guards. "Arrest all the fugitives and serfs who started the fight and bring them to the castle. I will personally judge this fight." He paused, then looked at Koya with great interest. "I also want to ask you, what's the matter with the charged oatmeal?" To be continued. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 323. Returning to the castle hall, Roland sat back in his seat of honor and looked down at his subjects. As far as he could remember, Prince Roland had only exercised his right to a trial once when he had just arrived in Border Town. Later, he had a falling out with the nobles, and his days were not going well, so he had left everything in his hands to bear of and never asked about it again. Seeing that everyone had arrived, Roland announced the start of the trial. First, all parties stated their reasons, and then he asked the questions himself. With Nightingale's secret assistance, he didn't need to judge who was deliberately lying and who was insincere, nor did he need to have a heart as meticulous as that of a Grim Reaper student. Determining who was responsible became easy and simple. The truth of the matter was soon revealed. Koya Harvey was unwilling to accept being stripped of his knight status, and at the same time tired of the cumbersome paperwork in City Hall, so he vented his resentment on the fugitives. He took advantage of the oatmeal distribution to deliberately collect fees from the fugitives and sow discord between the two sides. He claimed that it was precisely because the serfs did not hand over all their grain that the stock of wheat was insufficient and could not be distributed free of charge. In fact, Koya had been collecting fees for oatmeal for several days. Because he wore a striking city hall uniform, most of the fugitives were afraid of retaliation from the officials and kept silent, which made him even worse. Today, a fugitive named Vader came forward to protest against the other party's actions, which caused a commotion, and all of this came to light. After understanding the situation, Roland was a little relieved. An organization should be full of vitality and vigor during its ascension period. Although corruption and rigidity were inevitable after it stabilized, that should only happen after Grey Castle was unified. If such a problem appeared in the early stages, the organization was doomed to not go far. Now it seemed that it was only Koya Harvey's personal behavior, and that it did not involve the other officials of City Hall. Moreover, the matter was limited to extortion, and not the collusion with the serfs to resell grain and sell it privately. Of course, he was also responsible for this. At that time, City Hall was in urgent need of manpower. Without any screening or training, he had only given a warning to the surrendered knight to Barov. In the end, reality proved that not everyone could accept this job without any complaints and endure the huge psychological difference from being a knight to a commoner. Roland called Barov to his side and asked in a low voice, "How does the Lord usually handle this situation?" "Your Royal Highness, there are two kinds of cases," the latter replied respectfully. If the offender is a noble, after handing over a few golden dragon coins, he can be exempted from any punishment. But if a commoner attacks a noble, the crime can be big or small, ranging from cutting off his hand to whipping. "But Koya was no longer a nobleman," said the prince, shrugging his shoulders. "I stripped him of his title." "Yes, your highness. In this way, the punishment will be based on the mood of the lord. No fixed number." Barov shook his head. He frowned. Everything depended on his mood. The implication was that it didn't matter how the commoners were manipulated. In the eyes of the nobles, they weren't people that needed to be treated seriously. Other than chopping off their hands, breaking their legs, whipping them, and pulling out their nails, are there any more ordinary punishments? For example, imprisonment. Imprison? Barov was taken aback. "You mean simply locked up? What kind of punishment is that?" "The prison is only a place to temporarily detain prisoners, and sooner or later they will be dragged out for trial. If you keep them locked up, you will also have to provide them with food. I'm afraid that in the eyes of some people, this is already a reward." Well, it seems that the imprisonment that was commonly used in later generations wouldn't be useful here. After thinking for a moment, Roland decided to follow the rules of Grey Castle. He stood up and swept his eyes across the hall. "I will now pronounce the sentence. Koya Jarvis, for dereliction of duty and extortion of fugitives, will be stripped of all his duties in the city hall and sent to work in the mines for 10 years. In addition, he will be fined 3 times the amount of the extorted income. Vader, for taking the initiative to attack the city hall personnel, will be sentenced to 10 lashes. The rest of the fugitives and serfs who participated in the fight will be fined 2 silver royals or 5 lashes. The oatmeal will continue to be distributed free of charge, and all the money that was previously extorted will be returned." He looked at the city hall director. "The above sentence will be implemented by you, and the results will be announced to the people of the temporary residential area. As you command, your highness." Barov bowed. Returning to his office, Roland leaned back in his chair and stretched. Then he felt a pair of hands on his shoulders, gently massaging them. He closed his eyes and enjoyed this moment of leisure. This incident made Roland realize that with the increasing number of subjects and the rapid expansion of the city hall's authority, the issue of internal supervision might have reached a point where he had to face it. But he didn't want to set up an organization similar to the prosecutor's office, and he was even more unwilling to have the public security, procuratorial, and judicial independence in this era. The former not only required a large number of literate people, but it was also easy for it to become a political body that attacked each other and shirked responsibility, hindering the implementation and development of policies. The latter would also weaken the power of the Lord. It was better to have the power to enact, interpret, and judge laws in his own hands. He needed a simple and effective system that didn't need too many people to play the role of a supervisory organization. Roland grasped the hand on his shoulder. Nightingale dispelled the fog, took the prince's hand and sat back on the table, tilted her head and asked, "What's wrong?" Her slender legs dangled over the edge of the table. The high moccasins and close-fitting leather pants on her feet formed a perfect curve. Roland coughed twice. "I intend to set up a new department to supervise the city hall, as well as to arrest other individuals or groups that may endanger the stability of the Western Territory. This department only needs to report to me, completely independent of the city hall and the First Army," he said word by word. "I will temporarily name it the Security Bureau of the Western Territory, and I want you to be the person in charge." "Me?" She blinked her eyes. "That's right, only you can easily distinguish between truth and falsehood. Any deceptive tricks are meaningless in front of you." Roland nodded. "How about it? If you want, I can provide you with afternoon tea with ice cream in winter. And," Nightingale gently pinched his hand, "even if you don't say these things, I will promise you, as long as it's something you want to do." "Oh." Roland suddenly felt a little embarrassed. She smiled and did not let the silence continue. "But what should I do?" "Well, the supervision part is very simple." The prince adjusted his mood. "I will set up an inspection box at the gate of the castle district. You only need to check the report letters in it." In order to solve this problem in the least costly way, it was undoubtedly to mobilize the masses to supervise, and let the city hall itself supervise itself, just like the last year during the months of demons to catch the spies in Border Town. In the future, this method was not easy to use, whether it was the target of the report or the reporter themselves. They needed to spend a lot of energy to verify. And at the same time there were false reports, not to mention deliberate framing. But these shortcomings did not exist in the face of Nightingale's ability. Verification of information became easy. She only needed to ask face-to-face. Accurate reports would be rewarded, false accusations, false reports would be punished. Implementation around these 2 points, the reporting system would inevitably be extremely efficient. As for maintaining the stability of the Western Territory, eliminating threats and hidden dangers, it is more like an internal intelligence system. "I will slowly expand the manpower for you, until your vision can expand to the entire Western Territory." To be continued. Chapter 324. At this point, Roland also had a general plan for the security system of his territory in the future. The current population of Border Town was about 20,000 people. In addition to the local natives, there were also people from Longsong's stronghold and refugees from the eastern region. When the envoy sent by Bearov returned, they might even bring a group of people from the southern and northern parts of the kingdom. The composition of the population would become more complicated, and the quality would also be uneven. Conflicts like today's would only increase. Therefore, he also needed to establish a public security system to replace the current patrol work of the First Army. Sooner or later, internal violence and external violence would be separated. He had also considered this problem before, but because of the lack of manpower he gave up. Now the First Army needed to focus on fighting the demonic beasts, and the population was growing rapidly, so it was time to implement this plan. The first trial would be final, and the first trial would be final. The public security would arrest criminals in accordance with the law and handle civil disputes. The Security Bureau would be responsible for maintaining the purity of the system, which could effectively avoid power corruption. At the same time, it could also use public security personnel to carry out cleaning operations, saving manpower and resources. This was the outline of the public security system that Roland envisaged. The most ideal situation was to first test this public security system in Border Town, and when the city was built next year, it would be promoted to the entire western region. At that time, whether it was an autonomous territory of the nobility or not, it would have to implement the same set of laws and accept the control of a unified department. He was the only one who could be above the law. Roland knew that he was the largest noble in the western region, so he could not say that everyone was equal before the law. nor could he abolish the aristocratic system. But he could at least make it so that there were no traditional feudal nobles in his city. If he wanted to receive the protection of the western region, he would have to hand over his autonomous power. As for the person in charge of the public security department, Roland had already thought about it. Chief Knight Carter Lannis, who was full of a sense of justice but did not act pedantically, was a good choice. When Vader hobbled back to his temporary residence, the old man Kakasim immediately came to greet him. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," he said with a grin. "His Highness sentenced me to 10 lashes. "Let me see you," Kakasim said eagerly. "Let's talk in the house." Vader walked into the house. A warm aura immediately dispelled the chill in his body. He closed the door. It was as if the inside and the outside world were two different worlds. Compared to the previous wooden shack that leaked wind and rain everywhere, this somewhat low and narrow mud hut was actually more comfortable. By the way, the locals seemed to call these houses cave dwellings. The old man asked him to lie down on the stove bed. Then he peeled off the clothes on his back and couldn't help but gasp. "Your back is covered in blood. I'll go get some ash for you." "No, please don't. This is just a blood stain from the torture. The bleeding has already stopped. Sir Knight said that it's better to leave it open like this. It'll only take 2 or 3 days for the wound to heal." 2 or 3 days? Kakasim shook his head worriedly. "No, child, you may fall into a high fever and your back will swell up. Even if your body is strong, it will take you at least a week to recover. You should know better than me what happens when the disease flares up." "You may not believe it," he licked his somewhat dry lips. "I don't feel much pain from the wound on my back. On the contrary, I feel a cool and itchy feeling. This is a sign of healing." After the lashes, they poured a bucket of water on my back. "Salt water?" The old man frowned. "I thought so at first, but the expected burning pain didn't come." Vader chuckled twice. The knight who carried out the punishment said that this water can eliminate all pathogenic microorganisms. If you want the wound to heal quickly, don't do anything unnecessary and just let it dry. "Pathogenic microorganisms what?" "Microorganisms," he curled his lips. "Who knows what they are? It's probably related to witches." The old man lowered his head, and after a long time he said in a deep voice, "You shouldn't have stood up for me, as long as you bear with it. If you bear with it, you'll suffer even more severe treatment. I know what kind of person that guy is, or rather, most of the nobles are the same." Vader spat. "I heard that the snow here will last for several months. Even if we add up the money we have, we won't be able to last until then." He paused. "Moreover, I deliberately chose that time to beat him." "Deliberately?" Kakasim was startled. "Because every day at this time, His Royal Highness will appear at the western city wall. Since he promised to provide free food, he must hate this kind of behavior that tarnishes his reputation. This is also the most effective method. If it was just a simple fight, it might not even reach His Royal Highness' ears. After all, Koya Jarvis may have been instigated by someone. If the officials of the city hall want to suppress this news, it would be useless no matter what we say. But it's also possible that he was instigated by the Lord. The possibility is extremely low. If His Royal Highness wants to save money, he can directly reduce the 3 meals to 2. Moreover, I have inquired in advance. Whether it is the local residents or the serfs, they are all full of praise for His Royal Highness' benevolence and wisdom. He smiled proudly. "You see, I didn't bet wrongly, did I? So that's how it is." The old man let out a long sigh. "You've really seen through it thoroughly." But there was also a part where he didn't guess correctly, Vader thought, and that was the punishment. As a patrol member who had worked in Valencia for more than 10 years, he had a deep understanding of the ugliness under the city's glamorous appearance. He had seen more than a dozen nobles who used their power to extort money, and it even happened in the patrol team from time to time. Therefore, it wasn't difficult for him to deal with these high and mighty nobles. His Royal Highness's reaction was basically as he had expected. Only the punishment was beyond Vader's expectations. In this case, a lord who loved his reputation would mostly judge the bullied innocent, but he had punished everyone. Compared to his reputation, His Royal Highness seemed to care more about the system. For a lord who was used to doing as he pleased, this was indeed a rare quality. What do you plan to do next? The old man asked after a moment of silence. I will rest for 2 days, as Sir Knight specially approved. After that, I will continue to do what I did before, helping those guys who carry strange weapons to do some miscellaneous work. You could have lived in the inner city and lived a decent life with the craftsmen. But you can't go in, Kakasim. Don't talk about this anymore. He shook his head. I won't leave you outside. This old man was neither his family nor his elder. Half a year ago, he was still a prisoner locked up in prison. Everyone knew that the old man was pushed out by the black street rats to be used as a scapegoat. But this kind of thing was common, so the patrol team was simply too lazy to care. Later on, Valencia was ransacked by a large group of pirates. He was originally going to die in this turmoil, but at the critical moment, the old man hid him in a cell and covered his body with a smelly bedsheet. Finally, he was lucky enough to escape. Vader didn't expect that he would actually be rescued by a prisoner, who he usually didn't even want to look at. He suddenly understood that there was no difference between him and those disgusting nobles. The other 2 people in the room both knew Kakasim's identity. It would be fine with him watching over him, but once he was gone, they would definitely find trouble with the old man. Don't worry, everything will get better. Vader patted the other's shoulder. 2 days later, he heard news from the inner city that His Royal Highness was recruiting public security members. To be continued. Chapter 325. Hey girls, do you want a bowl of fish soup? Captain Jack stuck his head into the cabin and curled the pipe in his mouth. Just now a lucky guy caught a large tailless trout. Thank you, Tilly Wimbledon nodded. We'll be right there. Fish soup again. After the captain left, Ashes sighed. What's so good about this tasteless thing? You can add more salt to the bowl, Breeze chuckled. Pepper is also fine, but it's more expensive. I'm afraid Mr. Jack won't put it in for you. Don't put anything in it. The boiled soup is close to the original taste, and it also tests the quality of the food itself. Andrea elegantly combed her light blonde hair. Lady Tilly, let's go to the captain's cabin. As long as it's hot, Shavy the shortest muttered. My toes are freezing. The group of people went up the stairs from the bottom of the Charming Beauty to the poop. Jack One Eye was standing by the porthole, looking at the white track that was rolling and spreading behind the ship. This damn weather, how did it suddenly become so cold? He blew out a ring of smoke. 3 gods, it's only mid-autumn. Maybe the gods are asleep. Ashes shrugged. Baba, you can't say that at sea, Captain Jack grinned. The sea god is always staring at us. He made a blessing gesture on his chest. Forget it, let's not think about it. Let's have a bowl of fish soup to warm our stomachs first. In order to enjoy warm food in the captain's cabin, he didn't hesitate to make a big hole in the floor. He put a brazier in the center of the hole and filled it with sand to prevent it from igniting the whole ship. A large pot of fish soup was boiling and bubbling on the brazier, making a gurgling sound. The fragrance filled the whole room. Just like that, the 6 of them took off their shoes and sat around the brazier. Their feet were buried in the warm sand, allowing their cold toes to fully touch the sand and enjoy the warmth brought by the charcoal fire. Tilly took the fish soup handed by the captain and gently blew on it. The steaming soup was different from the milky white soup made of blacktail fish. This bowl of soup was dark yellow, and the oil floated on the surface, reflecting a crystal luster. When she saw the occasional specks of green and white in the soup, she knew that the old captain had taken out all the goods from the bottom of the box. The ship often sailed for several months, making it difficult for the crew to eat fresh vegetables and fruits. These tender shallots were obviously preserved with ice saltpeter. The fragrance of the shallots neutralized the fishy smell of the fish. Paired with the ginger slices and a bit of ale, all that was left was a rich, mellow, and delicious taste. Tilly drank the fish soup slowly. Every time the soup was about to burn her tongue, she would pause for a moment and take a few deep breaths. With every sip, she could clearly feel that the soup that she drank was like a warm current that flowed down her throat all the way to her stomach, causing her stomach to become warm. The chill soon faded, and she even felt her body slightly heat up. Try adding some chili. Jack pointed to the crock with seasoning next to the brazier. The taste will be more special, and it will especially drive away the cold. It's even more effective than wine. Although the true essence of food is the original taste, I have to say that these ingredients are just right, and the taste is not bad at all, Andrea praised. Aren't you going to drink? Tilly looked at Ashes. The latter waved her hand. Forget it, I really can't stand the fishy smell of sea fish. At first, Tilly could not accept the fjord's people's habit of eating fish. Any meal could not be without a variety of fish. Not to mention the conventional grilled, boiled, and fried fish, there were also strange methods such as fish jelly, fish sauce, and caviar. However, after forcing herself to eat several times at formal banquets, she found that the taste was actually not bad. Once she became familiar with the fishy smell of the sea, it could further enhance the taste of the food itself. Like dried fish, grilled cuttlefish, and even fried smelly fish, which had a pungent smell, she could now slowly try them. Our Miss Ashes has been spoiled by the barbaric cooking methods of Border Town. Andrea covered her mouth and said, It's a pity that after tasting spices and refined salt, she not only lost the ability to distinguish delicious food, but now it seems that even her courage is gone. What did you say? Ashes glared at her. Why isn't that the case? Andrea let out a series of laughter. Just a little fishy smell is enough to make you flinch. You are as willful as a little girl. How can we expect you to stand up for Lady Tilly when she needs you? So that's how it is. It seems that you really want to provoke me into a fight with you. Ash's tone suddenly calmed down. Give up, Border Town has a terrible weapon, much more powerful than your arrows. Even so, I still won the competition. So if you want to take away the position of Lady Tilly's personal guard from me, you still have to practice for a few more years, she paused. Or maybe for a lifetime. You, Ashes raised the corner of her mouth. In addition, the food invented by His Highness Roland is not just a superposition of spices and refined salt. You will understand when you taste it. But remember not to drip your saliva on your clothes. Lady Tilly can't afford to lose face. Nonsense, that's you. Tilly couldn't help but laugh out loud. These two were the top witches on Sleeping Island, and they often fought fiercely for who was the strongest, but she knew that both Ashes and Andrea were her best subordinates. When danger came, they would not hesitate to fight side by side and build the impregnable walls of Sleeping Island together. The dispute between the two made the atmosphere in the room lively. Seeing this scene, Tilly couldn't help but think of the 5 witches who had been sent to Border Town. She wondered if they were doing well in her brother's territory. At this moment, the charming beauty suddenly shook violently without warning. Be careful. Ashes pulled Princess Tilly away. The iron pot on the brazier was overturned, the soup extinguished the charcoal fire, and the fish fell all over the floor. Then there was a sharp whistle outside the cabin. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! A sailor rushed into the captain's cabin and shouted in panic. Mr. Captain, there is more than one mutant sea ghost. Isn't sea ghost another name for demonic beasts? Tilly was startled. How could they come to this place? They ran out of the poop deck, and saw more than a dozen fish monsters with crab feet on the deck, and some were climbing onto the charming beauty from both sides of the ship. They moved quickly, and when they moved they looked like giant cockroaches. The waving human arms on both sides of their heads were so powerful that they could break a sailor's neck. Since you don't want to accept the challenge, let's have a competition. Andrea snapped her fingers, and a golden light emerged from between her fingers, turning into the shape of a bow. She held it firmly in her hand. Whoever kills the most monsters will be the most powerful one. It doesn't matter. Ashes pulled out the strangely shaped giant sword from her back. I'm going. Chapter 326. Tilly injected her magic power into the stone of flight, and leaped into the air, overlooking the entire deck. Most of the crew members of the Charming Beauty were experienced sailors. After the initial panic, they picked up their weapons and fought against the demonic beasts, gradually moving closer to the poop. Obviously, they also knew that they could not defeat so many enemies by themselves. Their only hope lay in the witches on the ship. After Ashes joined the battle, the situation quickly changed. She was like a gust of wind, and wherever she went, there were screams and wails of monsters. Any demonic beast that dared to face her giant sword would be cut in half, and their severed limbs would fall all over the deck. Andrea was not to be outdone. Her magic longbow could turn any object into an arrow, and its power and accuracy were astonishing. Therefore, she rarely prepared a conventional arrow, but a bag of glass beads. The demonic beasts hit by her didn't even have the chance to scream. They just twitched and fell to the ground. The hard marbles were enough to penetrate their skulls within 20 steps and turn their skulls into a paste. Breeze and Shavy walked back and forth on the deck, helping the injured sailors. With the protection of an invisible barrier, the demonic beasts could not get close to them. Seeing that the demonic beasts were quickly killed, Tilly still did not relax her vigilance. These fish-shaped monsters were obviously not enough to cause the violent shaking of the charming beauty at the beginning. It felt like a huge monster was hitting the bottom of the ship underwater. Without the protection of Molly's servants, the ship would probably become a pile of broken planks floating in the sea if this happened a few more times. The witches could barely protect themselves, but it was estimated that only a few sailors could escape the fate of being buried in the stomach of the fish. Just as she had expected, when the last demonic beast was flattened by Ash's sword, a huge shadow appeared in the water in front of the ship's hull. It was definitely not the size of a fish. The shadow quickly approached the surface of the water and rushed towards the charming beauty. "Be careful," she shouted. Before she could finish her words, the shadow passed under the ship, and the ship shook violently again. The two masts made a series of frightening sounds, as if they would collapse at any time. Fortunately, the shadow did not make any other attack movements and quickly disappeared into the depths of the sea. It probably wanted to use its back to knock the charming beauty over, and then eat its fill. Tilly landed back on the deck and briefly explained the situation to them. "We have to force it out of the sea. Otherwise, this damned monster will sink the ship sooner or later." Ashes frowned. "I'll try," Shavy said. "Since it's coming close to the bottom of the ship, as long as it's close enough, I can use a barrier to block its impact." "Oh God of the sea." Old Jack wiped the sweat off his forehead. "If the opponent is really as huge as Lady Tilly said, normal attacks won't have much effect. Even if we force it out of the sea, how are we going to kill it?" "Leave it to me." Andrea tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear and revealed a confident smile. "Within 10 steps, no enemy can take a full blow from me." The shadow soon appeared, but this time it changed its direction and rushed towards the charming beauty from the stern. Tilly, who was monitoring from the air, immediately sent out a warning signal. Shavy ran to her position and jumped out of the ship. Her waist was firmly tied with several coils of hemp rope. The other end of the rope was held in Ash's hand, which was used to steadily control the monster's descending height. When the shadow attacked, Shavy instantly opened her barrier, and a gap suddenly appeared in the gray sea, as if it was separated by something invisible. The monster hit the barrier, and its huge body suddenly stopped. Shavy let out a muffled groan, and her hands hung limply, as if she had consumed a great deal of strength. The shadow under her feet rapidly expanded, and the sea suddenly rose. "Quickly pull her up." Tilly swooped down and shouted. Ashes pulled Shavy up with one hand, and just as she pulled her onto the deck, a huge sea beast roared and rushed out of the water. The raised waves made the charming beauty sway from side to side. At first glance, it looked like a cross between a sharp-toothed shark and an octopus. Several tentacles stretched out from its triangular head and directly hit the deck. Even listening to the sound, it was obvious that it was extremely angry at this inexplicable collision. Its tentacles, which were as thick as an adult's thigh, swept the railing into a mess, but it was unable to break through the defense that Shavy had put up. "Andrea." Ashes bent down, her fingers clasped together, and her hands formed a bowl-shaped shape. "Come." The latter stepped on Ash's palm. "Leave everything to me." The extraordinary forcefully threw her out, and in the blink of an eye, she had already flown above the monster's head. She summoned her magic bow and pulled the string to its fullest. Suddenly, a dazzling light burst out from between the bow and the string. This light was like the sun peeking out of the clouds. and the sea was reflected in a golden color. Go! Lightning flashed, and this arrow made of pure magic let out an ear-piercing sound, as if it was thunder itself, and entered the monster's body. The monster's grayish-brown skin suddenly swelled up, and golden cracks spread all over its body. From its body, a ray of light emerged, and then with a loud bang, it exploded into pieces. The huge explosion stirred up a circle of ripples on the surface of the sea. The black blood was like ink, dyeing the sea black, and the exploded internal organs fell like rain. The tentacles that were originally wrapped around the ship curled up, and together with the monster whose head had been blown off, they sank to the bottom of the sea. Andrea fell into the sea with a splash. "Ah, help, help, I can't swim, Gulu, someone help me." Ashes looked at the tired face of Shavi, and helplessly sighed. Really an idiot who only knows how to act cool. She untied the giant sword on her back, dived into the sea, and swam towards the monster. Tilly finally breathed a sigh of relief. The threat of the sinking ship had been removed, and at least she didn't have to worry about swimming to border town. Suddenly, she felt the tip of her nose become cold, and when she raised her head, she couldn't help but freeze in place. She didn't know when, but she saw snowflakes floating in the gray sky, like fairies flying all over the sky, covering her entire field of vision. "This is snow." Breeze stared at the melting ice crystal in his hand. "Does it snow in Grey Castle in autumn?" "Oh, I was wondering why it got colder the further west we went." One-eyed Jack took out his pipe and lit it again. "It seems that you really live in an abyss of suffering." Tilly didn't answer, but her expression was solemn. Breeze came from the Kingdom of Dawn, where it was spring all year round. Old Jack was from the fjords, and even in winter, it was rare to see heavy snow. But for the western region of Grey Castle, snow had a special meaning. The court tutor had said that this snow was endless, accompanied by the horns of the demons' invasion. It symbolized the beginning of the months of demons, and would not subside until the end of the months of demons. Although the months of demons never had a fixed end date, it usually began in winter. Could it be that Border Town was already under the attack of the demonic beasts? Moreover, the water ghosts in the sea only appeared east of Burning Fire Island, and now there were traces of them even in the southernmost corner. I don't know if the merchant ships going to and from the mainland of the kingdom will be attacked by this group of monsters. Tilly became more and more worried. After sailing in the heavy snow for 2 days, they finally saw the hazy coastline. Chapter 327. Is this the place where you docked last time? Tilly asked, looking at the towering rock wall in front of them. After seeing the coastline, the charming beauty had been sailing along the shore to the west until they reached the beach, when Ashes shouted to stop the ship. "Well, look," she pointed to the top of the mountain. Tilly looked in the direction she was pointing and saw 2 orange flags fluttering in the wind. Although the last time we came here it was still a beach, but the 2 flags show that we didn't go the wrong way. "I also remember it," Old Jack said with a pipe in his mouth. "But last time they carried a huge balloon to transport all the witches over the cliff. How are you going to cross it?" "A huge balloon?" Tilly asked curiously. "Yes, it can fly when it is filled with hot air," Ashes nodded. "It is said that it is an invention of His Highness Roland. The principle is to use the rising force of hot air to lift the balloon and the people into the sky." The 5th princess looked a little complicated. "The court tutor didn't teach us these things." Then she spat out a white breath. "Anyway, we will see him soon, and then we will naturally know the result. Let's go ashore." "Are you sure you don't want to wait for him to pick you up on the ship?" The captain shook off the ash. "What about this cliff?" "Leave it to Shavi," Tilly smiled. Because this was a naturally formed coast, no one knew the depth of the seabed, so the charming beauty didn't dare to get too close, and could only send people to the shallows by releasing a landing boat. After the group stepped on the thick snow, Tilly looked at Jack one-eyed. "Mr. Captain, then I will have to trouble you to wait here for 3 or 4 days. Lotus and the others still need your help to send back to Sleeping Island." "Of course," the captain replied. "Without you on board, I don't dare to go back the way we came. God knows if those mutated water ghosts will come to the door again." Tilly walked to the edge of the cliff and used the magic stone's ability to fly directly to the top of the mountain. observing the surrounding situation. The terrain behind the mountain was much higher than the shallows, and it was almost level with the top of the mountain, which meant that they only needed to climb, not to land. The height of the mountain wall was about 50 steps, and the magic consumption would be greatly increased when the barrier was used to push objects. But such a small distance should not be difficult for Shavi. She slowly landed beside the four of them. Shavi, I'll have to trouble you with the three of them. Yes, Lady Tilly. The latter patted her chest with a smile, and then summoned an invisible barrier. After 2 days of rest, she had already recovered from resisting the fierce impact of the giant beast at the bottom of the sea. When everyone stepped on the invisible barrier, she activated her magic and made it rise slowly. After a while, they went over the top of the mountain. Then, under the guidance of Ashes, the group spent half a day and finally arrived at Border Town. The first thing that entered Tilly's eyes was a uniquely shaped steel bridge. It sat on the wide river, and there were only 2 piers at the bottom. Other than the neatly arranged iron beams and pillars, there were no unnecessary decorations or patterns on its body. The snow covering the bridge formed a sharp contrast with the exposed black bridge. At first glance, there was an indescribable grandeur. This bridge is really big, Breeze exclaimed. How many iron ingots did they melt to build a bridge like this? It's really a waste of materials. Obviously, a pontoon bridge could solve the problem of passage. What's the point of building such a high bridge? Ashes disagreed. Border Town itself is the last stop of the merchant fleet. Do you think there are ships that want to go to the source of the river to do business? Ignorant remarks. Andrea elegantly shook her index finger. Even if I'm not from Grey Castle, I can still see that the woodland in the west is quite valuable for reclamation. There are no towns now, but that doesn't mean there won't be any in the future. If you want to continue to expand your territory, expanding into an uninhabited area is the best choice. At that time, the pontoon bridge will become a blockage for the river transportation. Lady Tilly's brother obviously thinks more long-term than you do. Ashes raised her eyebrows. Before, you called him a vulgar aristocrat who likes barbaric cooking, but now you call him Lady Tilly's brother? The word vulgar aristocrat was added by you. The blonde witch turned her head disdainfully. In addition, long-term vision and barbaric cooking don't conflict, so you don't have to sow discord in front of Lady Tilly. Tilly didn't pay attention to the routine dispute between the two. Instead, she turned her eyes to the other side of the river. She noticed an incredible phenomenon. At this time, the sky was still snowing, and the temperature was no different from winter. It was reasonable to say that at this time, the townspeople should be hiding in their homes, either around the stove or curled up under the quilt. Even in King's City, there weren't many people on the streets in winter. The cold would accelerate the loss of physical strength. If you wanted to keep your body warm, you had to eat more than usual, not to mention the risk of catching a cold. Therefore, except for the necessary food and drink, the vast majority of civilians always avoided taking any action in winter. However, there were constantly people coming and going by the river. Some of them were pushing carts, while others were carrying large bags. Their footsteps were hurried, and it seemed that they were working. Tilly didn't find any supervisors with whips around them. That was to say, these people were working completely voluntarily. How is this possible? After crossing the iron bridge, 2 guards carrying strange spears immediately came over. They were wearing the same uniform, and seemed to be in high spirits. Their demeanor was completely different from the usual patrols in big cities. Stop! Why are you coming from the south? One of them carefully looked at them for a moment. Wait, you are witches? This question made Tilly slightly startled. Although she already knew that the existence of witches had been made public in this town, but when she personally heard an ordinary person ask such a question in such a calm tone, her heart still set off a burst of waves. Yes, we are witches. You want to join the Witch Cooperation Association? The guard laughed. Please wait here. I will immediately report to the higher-ups. Wait. No, this is... Okay, we will wait here. Tilly stretched out her hand to interrupt Ashes's words. Also, can I ask what these people are busy with? They are repairing the dock. Because of the sudden snowfall, a lot of things have been messed up. As for what they are doing specifically, I am not clear. When the guard returned to his post, Ashes puzzledly asked, "Why didn't you tell them your identity? Aren't you curious? How will he receive a witch from another city?" Tilly playfully blinked her eyes. Not long after, a tall and slender woman dressed in white walked over. She had long, curly blonde hair, and an impeccable appearance. Even if she couldn't see her magic, Tilly could feel the sharp aura emanating from her body, just like an unsheathed blade. There was no doubt that this person was a combat witch, and an extremely powerful one at that. I really thought that there was a new witch who wanted to join the Witch Cooperation Association. Didn't you return to Sleeping Island? She first looked at Ashes, and then swept her eyes over the crowd. When her eyes fell on Tilly, she suddenly froze. In an instant, the sharp feeling disappeared, and was replaced by a watery warmth. "Hello, my name is Nightingale," she nodded in greeting. "You must be Tilly Wimbledon, His Highness Roland's sister, right?" To be continued. Chapter 328. Lady Tilly. Led by Nightingale, they walked into the Lord's castle. The fifth princess did not expect that the first person to come out to greet her would be Sylvie. She happily ran towards her, and without paying her respects, she bent down and hugged her. "Why did you come? It's still autumn." "It's no different from winter," Tilly said with a smile. "Where are the others?" "Lotus is building houses for the refugees. Evelyn and Candle should still be in the industrial area at this time. And Honey is training messengers in the back garden," Sylvie counted with her fingers. "His Highness has already sent someone to inform them." "Don't worry, I think you'll see them soon." A familiar yet very strange voice sounded from behind Sylvie. Tilly looked up and saw a gray-haired man smiling at her. His appearance hadn't changed much from her memory, but his smile and demeanor were completely different from before. "Welcome to Border Town, my dear sister." Tilly's mind was in turmoil. There were too many doubts she wanted to blurt out, but her face remained calm, and she followed Roland Wimbledon into a room that looked like a study. "Please sit down." The man poured a cup of warm black tea and handed it to her. "I haven't seen you for a whole year. I know you have a lot to talk to me about, and I do the same. But don't worry," he looked out the window at the snowy scenery. "This year's winter is still very long." She held the cup and didn't answer, but sat at the mahogany table, quietly looking at the fourth prince. Just this opening speech, Tilly felt that it wasn't her impression of her brother. He was weak and timid, outwardly strong but inwardly weak, and most importantly, he was used to evading, never thinking of facing head-on. The Roland Wimbledon in front of her was completely different. He was trying to take the initiative in the conversation. Although his tone was soft and gentle, it was completely the style of a superior. "Nightingale." Roland tilted his head. "But your Highness." The voice of the witch came from the room. "It doesn't matter, she's my sister." "All right." Nightingale was silent for a moment. Then she appeared and left the room unhappily. "Now it's just me and you." He smiled and returned to the square table. Tilly was silent for a moment. "You? Who are you?" She thought he would hesitate or pretend to be mysterious, but he answered so quickly. "I'm your brother, Roland Wimbledon, the fourth prince of Grey Castle." Then he laughed. "I know I've changed a lot, but I'm willing to explain it to you slowly." Tilly suddenly remembered what he had written in his letter. "As for what made me make this decision, and what made me no longer as indifferent to everything as I used to be, these trifles can be discussed in detail when the opportunity arises." It was probably this sentence that made her decide to come to this remote town. She couldn't help but raise the corner of her mouth. "I'll listen carefully." The whole story wasn't complicated, but it was very exciting. After listening to Roland's experience after he was enfeoffed to Border Town, Tilly found that her teacup was already empty. She let out a long sigh and went over the story again. Simply speaking, a witch named Anna touched Roland. Through the witch he saved, he saw the evil of the church and how it bewitched the people. Then Garcia's assassination made him feel the darkness under the power of the royal family. Even if he hid in a corner, he still couldn't escape the malice. Finally, he decided to change everything. Although this part sounded a bit dramatic, it could barely be considered an explanation. But the problem lied in the strange knowledge. whether it was the steam engine or the flintlock. It was impossible to know them just because of a moment's comprehension. So the ultimate cause of all this is the memory you said suddenly appeared in your head? Tilly asked. Yes, Roland said seriously. I know it's hard to believe, but it's the truth. I was lucky enough to escape the assassination of my third sister, and when I woke up from my coma, I understood all of this. If meeting Anna was the trigger, then the content of the memory is the help I want to change the status quo. Is it a witch? Tilly thought the possibility of replacement and control is not big. Sylvie has already confirmed this. The ability of the witches of the Witch Cooperation Association is not mysterious. They have to carry out special training every day. No one's ability belongs to these two categories, not even a little bit close. The only possibility is occupation. She can't rule out the possibility of such an ability. By occupying the other person's body, she can obtain the other person's thoughts. But this speculation is also uncertain. Even if Roland Wimbledon is not favored by his father, he is still the unquestionable prince of Grey Castle. The Godstone of Retaliation is not rare for him, and he always has the protection of the knight and his personal guards, so it is impossible for a witch without the ability to hide to easily get close to him. Moreover, even if there is such a witch, how could she know so many extraordinary things? When she was a child, she had searched through the palace library, and also received the teachings of several white-haired, erudite court mentors, but even they had never talked about using steam and snow powder to replace the knowledge of animal power and swords. So it seems that the bizarre knowledge and the bizarre experience are somewhat compatible. How can you prove that you are Roland Wimbledon, and not the extra memory? Tilly knew that this question is quite rude. If it were the previous prince, he would certainly fly into a rage, flip the table and leave. Because I still remember the things that happened in the palace. The other side's tone is still calm. I think that the essence of a person is the unique memory. If a witch becomes exactly the same as you, but the memory is different, she is still essentially another person. I have a lot of strange memories, but I don't remember where these memories came from. And your crying expression when I threw you on the broken glass is still vivid in my mind. So this is proof. He paused. Of course. I haven't had the time to apologize to you. I hope it's not too late. Tilly was silent. The Roland in front of her was clean, and his expression was sincere, as if he was telling an unquestionable fact. Obviously, no matter from what point of view, he is much better than the previous prince, but in my heart, I still have doubts. It's really unbelievable. It's normal, Roland seemed to see through her thoughts. A lot of things are inconceivable before you personally experience them. I didn't expect that my sister would actually awaken as a witch and hide it from everyone in the palace. But, as I said at the beginning, this winter is still very long. We can slowly get to know each other. This is probably the most suitable solution for now, Tilly nodded. Then for the next few months, I'll trouble you. Leave it to me, you'll like it here. To be continued. Your support is my greatest motivation. 19830-124. Chapter 329. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Sure, Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. After Tilly left the office, Roland let out a long breath. Obviously, speaking nonsense in front of a smart person was a very stressful thing, especially when one had to maintain a sincere expression the entire time. Fortunately, Nightingale's report gave him a moment of respite. All the witches of Sleeping Island had returned to the castle, so Roland took the opportunity to end the conversation. What do you think? Do you have a special feeling facing your own sister, a witch? Nightingale turned over and sat on the table, looking down at the prince. The latter rolled his eyes and grumpily said, "Is great pressure considered a special feeling? I thought it was going to be a touching reunion," she said, pursing her lips. "I don't have a good relationship with her." Roland sighed. "I often bullied her in the palace. When she grew up, she was no different from a stranger. It's already a pleasant surprise that she could come here." "Oh," she said meaningfully, "you won't be alone with other strange witches. I see that you trust her." "That's because I don't want you to see me lying." Roland didn't answer. He refilled his teacup, leaned back in his chair, and slowly took a sip. In short, you will understand in the future. Nightingale reached out and touched his lips. You'll tell me everything, right? I'll accept this promise, she said with a chuckle, then disappeared in front of Roland. Roland leaned back in his chair and recalled the entire conversation, looking for any possible loopholes. This was also the most suitable explanation he could think of. Years of work experience told him that the more lies he made up, the less they would stand up to scrutiny. Therefore, it would be difficult for him to justify his claims of deliberately hiding his abilities when he was young, finding ancient books by accident, or being taught by a hermit. In addition to being his sister, the other party was also the leader of the witch organization. Before the two sides formed a stable alliance, any exposed lies would bring a heavy blow to the trust. So he chose to tell the truth about the details that could be exposed, and the additional knowledge was all attributed to the sudden memory. Although it sounded incredible, compared to the even more incredible transmigration, at least there were not too many negative effects, and it could not be falsified. If it was the latter, it was hard to say whether she could accept a stranger from another world. As long as he insisted that he was the fourth prince of Grey Castle, no one could deny it. And what she wanted was probably an explanation from his own mouth. Roland knew in his heart that an outstanding leader would not always be entangled in the past. The most important thing was to work together and move forward. This winter would allow her to see the broad prospects of the Western region, as well as his sincerity in cooperating with her. This could be considered a successful meeting. As for the relationship between them, there would be plenty of time to repair it in the future. In the evening, a grand banquet was held in the castle hall. Not to mention the common pepper steak, fried eggs and white bread, all kinds of white wine, pan-fried bird beak mushrooms, steamed dumplings, and ice cream all appeared on the stage, raising the taste of the dishes to a new level. At the same time, the concept of fancy platters was introduced. A large porcelain plate was filled with a small piece of staple food drizzled with sauce. The visual effect was excellent, and it made people feel hungry at first glance. In the interlacing of toasts and candlelight, the banquet finally ended in a harmonious and lively atmosphere. Next was the more formal meeting. In the living room, the fireplace was blazing. Roland and the members of the Witch Union sat in a long row at the long table, while Tilly and the witches of Sleeping Island sat in the opposite row. Due to the sensitivity of her identity, Maggie simply turned into a pigeon and squatted on the chandelier overhead. Tilly was the first to speak. This time, in addition to helping Border Town resist the invasion of the demonic beasts, I also intend to bring back the 5 witches that were previously sent here. She gave a general description of the current situation on Sleeping Island. Next spring, a group of ordinary people will move into the island from Silver Moon Bay. We will have to rely on Lotus and Honey to provide additional housing and food. Roland suddenly felt a headache. The first army could resist the demonic beasts. Except for the agile and high-speed hybrids, there was almost no need for witches. But in terms of construction, the role of the witches was irreplaceable. Currently, the mountain ridge at the port had not yet been opened, the dock was only half built, and he still wanted to build a few more groups of cave dwellings. Can it be delayed for another half a month? I really want to agree, but the situation has changed. Tilly shook her head helplessly. A mutated water ghost has appeared in the southern cape. You can think of it as a fish species of demonic beast. I suspect that all of this is related to the months of demons. It is said that the longer the months of demons, the more ferocious the demonic beasts will be, so it will be safer for them to travel earlier. They are not suitable to fight. I know, so Breeze will escort them on the ship. Her ability is very effective in dealing with enemies with low intelligence. Moreover, we do not intend to return the way we came. Instead, we will go north along the coastline, and when we arrive at the port of Clearwater, we will take the usual commercial route to Sleeping Island. According to the news from the Bird Messenger, there are no demonic beasts on the route between the fjords and the kingdom. Roland had to make a final effort. In addition to Lotus and Honey, can the other 3 stay? They are only halfway through their primary education. If they leave now, it would be equivalent to giving up halfway. Pfft. Tilly could not help but laugh. It seems that you like them very much. For a moment he did not know how to respond to this sentence. I want to ask, how do you use Candle and Evelyn's abilities? Solidifying metal parts and making wine. The former can greatly improve the efficiency of mechanical operation, while the latter. Roland paused for a moment. Wine is a very good thing. In addition to drinking, it has many other uses. But on Sleeping Island, they are always worried that their abilities are useless and often. Tilly did not continue, but Roland guessed that it should be related to discrimination, just like what Mystery Moon had experienced in the Witch Cooperation Association. I am very happy to hear that you want them to stay. Sure enough, every witch has a unique role, and their abilities are not meaningless. She looked at Evelyn and the others. What do you think? I want to follow you, Lady Tilly, Sylvie said. Candle touched her head. Anywhere is fine. Lady Tilly, if you need me, I will return to Sleeping Island. Evelyn was silent for a moment before replying. Apart from that, I want to continue to stay in Border Town. I still have many things I want to learn from Teacher Scroll. Don't be so nervous. I'm not asking you to choose whether you want to stay or leave. This is not a matter of choosing between two. Tilly smiled and shook her head. I just want to understand the situation of your life in Border Town. You can return to Sleeping Island at any time. Lotus and Honey will also come back. I even want to invite the witches of Border Town to visit Sleeping Island. I hope that through our efforts in the future, whether it is in the Northern or Southern Territory, witches can live freely. Do you think I'm right, brother? Roland was slightly startled. This was the first time he had heard her call him that in public. Even with the fourth prince's memory, it was still more than 10 years ago. He smiled and nodded. There will be such a day. Chapter 330. Genius 1 second. Remember, if you want to go? TalkNet, providing you with wonderful novels to read. After talking about this matter, Roland cleared his throat and said in a serious tone, Next is the news about the devils and the ruins. He told Tilly about Border Town's recent discoveries behind the snowy mountains and in the concealing forest. I originally planned to send witches and the soldiers of the First Army to bring the people trapped in the ruins back to Border Town, but the heavy snow that came more than a month early disrupted the plan. The legendary Devil Army is actually so close, and there are still people living in the ruins from more than 400 years ago. Tilly was stunned. I'm starting to believe what you told me. Anna tilted her head and looked at Roland, who coughed twice, according to the scene observed and the reaction of the other side. The devils should have been entrenched behind the snowy mountains for many years. I guess they are limited by the scope of the red mist, and cannot continue to expand to the mainland of the kingdom. So for the time being they will not pose a threat to Border Town. In the next 2 years, I will establish coastal guard points to monitor their movements. He paused, but the sealed person in the ruins, she is likely to know the truth about the holy city of Tequila and the church's defeat. I also think so. Tilly closed her eyes and thought for a moment. Is there a way to go directly by air instead of by land? Ashes said that you have a tool that can carry people when it is filled with hot air. You want to take her out of the ruins on the day of the months of demons? Roland frowned. The Cloud Gazer hot air balloon can carry 10 people, or make it a little bigger, expanding the number of people to 15. But no matter what, it is impossible to take the soldiers of the First Army. If we encounter the devils, the witches may encounter casualties, plus the omnipresent demonic beasts. It is too dangerous. If we only rely on the Witch Cooperation Association, it is indeed very dangerous, Tilly nodded. But now we have Shavy and Ashes, the degree of danger has been reduced a lot. Love Gob Little say Neku. According to what you said before, the devil's main attack method is long-range spear throwing, and their strength is far beyond that of ordinary people in close combat. In this aspect, Shavy's invisible barrier could block several spears, and Ashes could suppress the enemy in close combat. Now that the months of the demons have just arrived, the strength of the demonic beasts is not strong. If you want to go to the ruins, now is the best time. Roland was a little hesitant. The last time he fought with the demons, he was at a disadvantage in aerial combat. The thought of flying over again made him feel uneasy. However, what Tilly said was also reasonable. Sylvie's magic eyes could ensure that the enemy would discover them first. As long as the hot air balloon maintained a height of 10 to 15 meters, which was to fly close to the treetops, it was completely certain that it would land before the enemy approached. Next, with Nightingale and Ashes as powerful attacks, the small team of 10 or so demons was completely annihilated. Even if there were any survivors, Shavy and Anna's double shields would ensure the safety of the team. He pondered for a moment. Are you sure you want to go? I think this may be an opportunity to solve the mystery, Tilly said frankly. This year's months of demons came early, and the demonic beasts appeared in the South Sea. I always have a bad feeling. Roland's heart slightly shivered. He also had this feeling. The months of demons was unlikely to be an abnormal phenomenon caused by climate change. He faintly felt that this was inseparable from the devils and the church. What about the team? I don't know much about the witches in Border Town, but I will personally go here, Tilly said without hesitation. Snowflakes fluttered in the gray sky. Maine and Tayfun slowly climbed the walls of Hermes, which had just experienced a battle. Warm black blood flowed under their feet, melting the white snow into a viscous blood. Fortunately, this blood was flowing from the enemy's body. Hundreds of God's Punishment Army soldiers were standing upright on the walls, waiting for the demonic beasts to launch the next wave of attack. Your Excellency, the warriors of the Judgment Army, who assisted the God's Punishment Army, clenched their fists and saluted. Most of them looked a little immature, with a mixture of fear and excitement in their eyes. They are still children. Tayfun sighed as they walked to an open space, looked at the wilderness and said, when I was their age, I was still grinding flour for the nobles in the mill. The God's Punishment Army must prioritize the defense of the new holy city, so I can only hand over the stubbornly resisting remnants of Wolfshart City to the experienced army of judges to clean up. Moreover, these people are just recently promoted believers, so before this they have never really been on the battlefield, Maine said helplessly. This snow came too early. Tayfun hesitated. The Holy Book didn't record such a situation. The Holy Book was also written by the Pope, so it's inevitable that there are omissions. The bishop leaned on the cold battlement, overlooking the cliff full of corpses. Ordinary demonic beasts couldn't climb such a high wall, and only hybrid beasts could threaten the holy city. As long as the general direction it pointed out is correct, it's fine. From the appearance of the wild beasts last year, we can infer that we have about 10 years left. 2 years to unify the 4 kingdoms, and 8 years to build the God's Punishment Army. At that time, the church will have a huge army of more than 10,000 people. He continued. Using the strong city wall and terrain of Hermes, we will stick to this plateau until the enemy's strength is reversed. I'm old. I'm afraid I won't be able to see that time. It has nothing to do with age, Lord Tayfun, Maine comforted. Too many people won't be able to see that moment like Alan, Stone, Lizzie. And Heather, Tayfun added. Yes, and Heather. He nodded. But no matter what, there will be people who will inherit our mission and continue on. Don't say such discouraging words. The old man shook his head and smiled. By the way, how is the snow powder Formula Zero got? Has it been tested in the pivotal secret area? It's used to deal with mortals. It won't be of much help to the church, Maine said disdainfully. Snow powder may be used to clean up groups of demonic beasts, but our real enemy is the Abyss Devils. Its lethality in open areas is greatly reduced, and if we want to make it powerful enough to injure the heavily armored devils, we must make it very large. Except for the God's Punishment Army, no one can throw a bag of snow powder half the size of a human body. Is that so? What a pity. If we want to defeat the devils, there is no chance of using any tricks, Maine said word by word. Only by defeating them head-on can we survive. At this moment, a long horn sounded from the watchtower on the side of the city wall. Woo! A long horn meant that the demonic beasts were coming. Let's go back to the cathedral. There will be another battle here. Yes. Tayfun nodded, and had just turned away when the horn sounded again. Woo! Woo! 2 long horns meant that there were many mixed demonic beasts among the demonic beasts. Main's heart trembled. There was no doubt that the god's punishment army would face a tough battle. But why is it so fast? This is only the first month of the months of demons. However, before the echo of the horn ended, the third horn sounded. The dull and continuous sound was like thunder, rolling over the sky of Hermes, and did not subside for a long time. Woo, woo, woo. Main could hardly believe his ears. He looked at Taifun, who was also looking at him in shock. The 3 horns meant that the situation was extremely urgent, and the new holy city was in danger. Even last time when the demonic beasts broke into the periphery of the cathedral, there was no such horn sound. What did the watchtower see? Main soon found the answer. Among the demonic beasts, there were 2 extremely large monsters. They had 4 thick fangs for feet and 2 hands, and were covered in pitch-black fur. One of their feet was as thick as the torso of a mixed demonic beast. From afar, the giant beasts looked like a moving fortress. Each step they took left a deep mark on the permafrost-covered plain. If the demonic beasts around them did not retreat in time, they would also be trampled into a pool of flesh and blood. There were many records of them in the Holy Book, such as the Announcer of the Dead, the Fearful Beast of Hell, the Fangs of the Devil. But what scared Main was not their terrible appearance, but the meaning they represented. Chapter 331. The next day, Roland said goodbye to Lotus and Honey in the castle's back garden. Although he didn't want them to leave so soon, but after hearing that the charming beauty was still waiting at the shoal, he decided not to delay it any longer. This way, at least he could show his generosity, and also wouldn't make things difficult for Tilly. Putting himself in their shoes, the other side was able to send the important witches to border town before the large-scale construction of Sleeping Island, which was already a show of sincerity. That being the case, he wouldn't be too demanding. In order to avoid a long trek in the snow, Anna and Vindy sent them to board the ship. If they used the cloud gazer to transport them, it would only take them half an hour to reach the shoal. Thank you for taking care of us these past few months. The 2 bowed in front of Roland. I should be the one thanking you, Roland smiled. You have made a lot of contributions to the construction of Border Town, so I have 2 gifts to give you. Gift? Lotus was slightly surprised, her cheeks showing a touch of crimson. Honey touched her own chest, glanced at Lotus's, and excitedly asked, "Can we also have them?" Roland took the 2 bags from Nightingale's hands and gave them to her. Yes, both of them. Honey couldn't wait to open the bag, and from inside pulled out a long white cloth. Hey, what is this? Isn't this a bra? Ahem, this is a scarf. He stepped forward and picked up the pure cotton cloth, wrapping it around her neck. This way, you won't have to worry about the cold wind and snowflakes pouring into your neck. If you wrap it a little thicker, you can also cover your ears. Oh, so warm, the latter exclaimed with a satisfied face. Roland didn't know if it was an illusion, but Lotus's face became even redder. There is something else inside. Honey played with the scarf for a while, and then took out a small square from the bag. Your Highness, is this also a gift? Yes, open it and see. Wow, it's so bright. She raised the iron box and said excitedly, Lotus, look, you can clearly see your own appearance. It was a small mirror embedded in a wooden box. It was also one of the products put into the convenience market. In Roland's life experience, as long as one was a woman, they would not be able to resist this kind of shiny thing. Honey's voice attracted the attention of the other witches. Soon, the witches of Sleeping Island gathered together and looked at themselves in the mirror, unable to suppress their love and envy. After all, this kind of crystal mirror made of Soroya's film was far more reflective, and the overall image was much better than the silver mirror, which also let Roland see a new way to bribe them. After the gifts were delivered, the hot air balloon was also inflated. The 2 of them boarded the basket and waved goodbye to Roland and the other witches. It was obvious that they were reluctant to leave the town. I have to say, this is indeed a good place. Tilly walked to his side and whispered, convenient water supply, comfortable rooms. It's hard to believe that you transformed a barren place into what it is today in just a year. Do you regret it? You mean sending witches to the town? She laughed. How could I regret it? If I can make their lives better, how could I regret it? Don't forget, I'm also a witch. In the White Garden, Tilly's smile was like clean snowflakes, beautiful without a trace of color. If there was such a sister in the future, the rate of people turning their heads would definitely be 100%. But in Roland's heart, it was clear that compared to her identity as a sister, her relationship with him was more like that of a collaborator, a natural ally. From her decision yesterday, it could be seen that in order to deal with possible threats, she even dared to go to dangerous places. Do you really want to go to such a dangerous place? Roland asked. Although you are an extraordinary witch, your ability is not suitable for fighting, right? Rest assured, I am not completely without the ability to protect myself. Tilly stretched out her hands and showed the prince the jewelry in her hands. He saw that on the ring finger of her left hand was a blue crystal ring, and on her right hand was a white silk glove, the back of which was inlaid with a red gem. To be honest, this kind of combination looked particularly strange. The asymmetrical dress style was simply like the popular mix and match style on the runway in the future. He was very curious about this yesterday, but out of politeness he didn't ask. This is a magic stone, a strange stone found in ancient ruins, she explained. After pouring magic into it, it can display different abilities. For example, this ring can let me fly freely like lightning. After saying this, as if to prove what she said, her feet slowly left the ground, and her body floated in the air as if it was weightless. This scene startled Roland. Her ability could actually be changed through a stone? He quickly realized the great significance contained in this. If it was possible to order abilities in batches, the witch's work efficiency would be greatly improved. Take Lotus, for example. If the Witch Union could have a magic stone that imitated Lotus ability, it would only take 1 day to complete the construction of the temporary residential area. After Tilly landed, she pointed her right hand to an open space, only to see a bright lightning burst out from her fingertips, and a bowl-sized hole appeared in the ankle-deep snow, revealing the dark ground below. So you can have 2 abilities at the same time? Roland asked in surprise. No, Tilly shook her head. The magic stone can only allow 1 ability to appear within a certain range. If I pour magic into both stones at the same time, then nothing will happen. She then smiled. I didn't intend to reveal this information to you so soon, but after the meeting last night, I think I might have misunderstood you. I'm very happy that you're willing to tell me about the ancient ruins, and I'm a little sorry. It doesn't matter, I can understand. By the way, I have some concerns. What was the bra that Honey was talking about? Roland almost choked on his saliva. Ahem, I don't know, maybe you can ask Sylvie or Evelyn. Well, Tilly shrugged. It seems that you still have some reservations about me. The prince didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Let's not talk about this, she blinked and said. I have been thinking about a question last night. If these ruins belong to the church, why did they abandon all the magic stones? According to Ash's experience, the church is likely to keep witches, and these things have the same important use for them. Even if they fled after the battle with the devils, and deliberately buried the results of the war, it doesn't prevent them from continuing to use these stones. It doesn't make any sense. The church doesn't care about this loss? Roland pondered, but he quickly rejected his own opinion. No, they shouldn't be able to mass-produce this kind of magic stone. Otherwise they would have already used it to hunt down the Fugitive Witch Cooperation Association. After all, if they could fly, most people wouldn't be able to escape the church's witches. Indeed, I recalled all the books about the church and the gods in the palace library, and found something very strange. Their historical records not only stopped at more than 400 years ago. Even the origin of the gods is vague. There are no illustrious names, no epic legends. In addition to the propaganda that they are omnipotent, omniscient, there are no more details to speak of. At least, compared to the 3 ancient gods, they appear to be much more illusory. Combining the 2 together, people can't help but have a strange feeling. What? Roland's heart shivered. The church seems to have suddenly appeared. To be continued. Chapter 332. Genius 1 Second to Remember Love Yo-Yo Go? Talked Net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. The church seems to have suddenly appeared. Even after returning to the office, Roland's heart was still echoing these words. He closed his eyes and carefully searched through Prince Roland's memory, but still couldn't find any more relevant content. His understanding of the church was similar to that of an ordinary noble. In the palace, Prince Roland didn't spend much effort on learning knowledge, and his knowledge of occultism was almost a blank. But if what Tilly said was true, then the church's propaganda strategy was too strange. Taking the religious legends of the original world as an example, the idea that God originated from the beginning of the world was child's play, and the idea that the world was created by God was the one that everyone unanimously chose. For example, the creation of the world in 7 days, the reincarnation of karma, and so on. A complete set of legends describing the power of God was the standard for every religion. In comparison, the church of this world seemed quite immature. However, Roland didn't have any more clues to continue his research, so he shook his head and decided to put these thoughts to the back of his mind. Perhaps after exploring the ancient ruins of the concealing forest, he would have all the answers. He went to the window and looked at the huge coating that was spread out on the ground in the garden. In the vast expanse of white snow, its green appearance was particularly striking. Now Soroya was gluing a larger air sac, and the new hot air balloon would be even larger and could carry more people. This was in consideration of the fact that if they couldn't find a way to rescue the trapped woman during the exploration of the ruins, they would simply let Anna cut the whole ice coffin and bring her back to Border Town along with a part of the transparent crystal. The departure time was set for 2 days later. The personnel had already been arranged. The sleeping island witches were Tilly, Sylvie, Shavy, Ashes, and Andrea. The witch union would send Anna, Vendi, Nightingale, Nana, Lightning, and Maggie. This time's lineup could be said to be unprecedentedly strong, with the highest level of attack, defense, and battlefield awareness. As long as they didn't use God's stone of retaliation, it would be difficult for the devils to get close to them. Your Highness, Chief Alchemist Sir Kemchester wants to see you. A guard said outside the door. Let him in. This time, Cal didn't come alone. He also brought his colleague Chavez with him. Your Highness, we already have some progress on the large-scale production of nitric acid that you requested. Really? Roland was slightly startled, and then a burst of joy surged in his heart. This was probably the best news he had heard in recent days. He stood up excitedly and personally poured a cup of tea for the 2 chemists. Tell me, how did you make it? This is the credit of Chavez, he said, stroking his beard and smiling. Let him explain it to you. Your Royal Highness. The young Chavez appeared to be somewhat reserved. He bowed and said, Your alchemy workshop. No, the chemical laboratory produces nitric acid by dry distillation of saltpeter to obtain dilute nitric acid, and then purify it with concentrated sulfuric acid. So I tried to combine the two together, and directly put the saltpeter in concentrated sulfuric acid to heat it. As a result, I succeeded in obtaining a nitric acid solution. Moreover, the purity was very high. I could even observe the smoking phenomenon recorded in elementary chemistry. Shared heat? But the two are not the same thing, Roland said, feeling strange. The temperature of dry distillation is much higher than that of shared heat. Moreover, the gas produced by dry distillation should be nitrogen oxide, and when introduced into water, it will form dilute nitric acid. The purification of concentrated sulfuric acid is only using the principle of its high boiling point and strong water absorption to reduce the water content of nitric acid. It does not involve a chemical reaction. I don't really understand why, but Mr. Sichi later did a few experiments and thought that my discovery was a coincidence. A coincidence? Roland looked at the chief alchemist. Indeed, Kyle affirmed. The two are not the same, but they produce the same effect. According to the chemical formula, I deduced that it should be some component of the saltpeter and sulfuric acid that produced nitric acid, which then evaporated in the heat. According to the formula, it looks like some kind of, well, nitrate. Roland's mind suddenly remembered that in the chemistry textbook, it was indeed mentioned that before the invention of synthetic ammonia, People use sodium nitrate or potassium nitrate to react with concentrated sulfuric acid to produce nitric acid. This was also the oldest industrial method. Because the main components of saltpeter were two kinds of nitrates, it was easy to obtain and extract, as long as the temperature was controlled. A steady stream of evaporated nitric acid could be collected. Of course, because this method consumed a large amount of sulfuric acid, it was also extremely easy to corrode the equipment. Later on, it was quickly eliminated by more advanced technology. However, these 2 points were not too big of a problem for Roland. His territory had not yet established a supporting fertilizer and pesticide industry, so the sulfuric acid produced was only used to purify nitric acid. As for the strong corrosiveness of the nitric acid steam, he could rely on Soroya's coating to solve it. Well done, Roland happily patted Chavez's shoulder. You actually managed to come up with this method by chance. You may not know this, but when he was in the Redwater City Alchemy Workshop, he had already shown extraordinary luck. Kyle Mosqui raised his eyebrows. Before learning chemistry, alchemy itself is a kind of exploration that requires luck. But this kid was able to discover the double acid production method in his early 20s, and became the youngest alchemist in the workshop, causing a group of 30 or 40-year-old apprentices to be so envious that their eyes turned red. You have to know that for the rest of their lives, it is very likely that they will only be apprentices. In any case, this is good news for Border Town, Roland praised. You can first try to produce a batch of equipment. I will let the witches cooperate with you. If it is feasible, then we can expand the production scale. As you wish. That's right, I still have another task for you. Roland then put away his happy mood and said in a solemn tone, now that we have a reliable source of nitric acid, I need you to try to produce a very dangerous item, nitroglycerin. How dangerous is it? Kyle asked. The raw material used is very simple, that is, a reaction between concentrated nitric acid and glycerin, supplemented by concentrated sulfuric acid as a catalyst. But during the reaction process you must strictly control the temperature and maintain ventilation. Because nitrification will produce a lot of heat, you can put the container in ice water to test. Remember, sudden changes in temperature, vibration, impact, and friction can all lead to an explosion. Roland didn't know whether this amateur knowledge was reliable or not, but there was no doubt that the composition was correct. Even if it was dangerous, he still had to try. During the test, use a small amount of acid, so that even if an accident occurs, Miss Nana will be able to rescue you. Chavez opened his mouth, but before he had the time to answer, Kyle had already agreed. I understand. How does its power compare to snow powder? The difference is like heaven and earth. It seems that it will be an interesting experiment, the chief alchemist said with a smile. 9 out of 10 chemists are potential explosion art lovers. This is really true. Roland thought. Nitroglycerin was extremely unstable. Nobel's safety explosives were made by adding diatomaceous earth to passivate the ester, which improved the safety, but reduced the explosive power. Roland naturally wouldn't choose this classical method. He intended to add nitrocellulose or nitrostarch to the nitroglycerin, both of which could play a stabilizing role, but could also further enhance the explosive effect. The former was an excellent smokeless propellant, while the latter was a powerful explosive. From their names, it could be seen that a large amount of nitric acid was the key to the evolution of black powder into chemical gunpowder. And now he already had this key. You're tuning in to the Lime's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.